order the Public Utility Committee meeting. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Young, Vice Chairman Boyd, Alderman Ballmer, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderman Arnowitz,
Aye. Here.
Alderwoman Ingracia,
Present.
Alderman Ogilvy, Chairwoman Flowers.
Present.
Board present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Welcome to the public utility hearing. This is our second of two hearings. We had one on May the 26th, and it basically was presenters from the entities that's really involved with the whole decision-making in this whole Veolia contract. Just to reiterate what we said on Wednesday, the Board of Aldermen has absolutely no vote in the contract with Veolia and the Water Department. This issue would not even be before us today, so I want to thank the chair members, the committee members for coming today, but because I'm the chairman of the Public Utilities and I was at one of the Board of E&A meetings and I've been contacted for people that have had concerns, whether pro or con about the contract, I decided to have a public hearing so that those that wanted to voice themselves could do so, and that the public can get a better information about what this really meant for the city of St. Louis. My concern here only is our water department, our quality of our water department, and where is the future of our water department as a city. Okay, I have one of the plants in my ward on Riverview at Chain Rocks, and I have residents that live in the area that are also here. So this is, the Board of Aldermen, again, is not taking a vote. There is no vote that we would take. This is basically for informational purposes only. Thank you. So if you want to contact the Board of E&A members, Comptroller Darlene Green, President Lewis Reed, or Mayor Francis Slay, I think you all know where to go because that's where I met you the first time, at the Board of E&A. There are some rules, as well as there are copies of the contract if you'd like to have them. If anyone wanted the members of the committee to have anything, any paperwork, that you had to provide that at this time so that it can be passed out. We are on live television and we are streaming, and there are rules, okay? There is no speaking to anyone on the panel, in the committee, from the audience. That is not tolerated. You will be given 5 minutes to speak. Of course, the presenters will be given more time, but anyone that has signed up on the list, even at 2.5 hours, which I plan to call this meeting at the end around 8:30, that should give almost 45 to 50 people a time to speak. If you feel like your point has already been made, we ask that you please, if I call your name, if you want to get up and just state whether you're for or against, and the person before you or two persons before you said what you said, just say, yes, I agree with what they said. I do not like the contract. I do like the contract, whatever that may be. But for some folks that may have something that they want to say that has not been repeated, please give them the opportunity to do so. The balcony is not open. It's for safety reasons and has not been open for years, so I do apologize for that. Usually this room is big enough, but I see you have a very big voice today. First, we're going to start out, I see one marshal. I don't know if there's another. So if we just can't control ourselves, the marshal will come over and we'll discuss that with you, okay? We're going to try to follow the format as we did Wednesday. We will have Kurt Scobie, the director of the Water Department, speak first. Just a summary of what he went over. The Board of Aldermen, we've asked questions already, so this is really about the public tonight. Aldermen, if there's just something very pressing that you need to ask, then please feel free to do so, but we really want to give tonight to the public. I was approached at the last meeting by the Dump Veolia to do a presentation. If they would have asked me to do it at the first hearing, I would have elected to that to happen, but that wasn't approached after the meeting, so I'm going to give them the first 15 minutes. We're going to check you out at 10 minutes to see how you're doing. After that, then there will be input from the public. So we're going to have the director of the Water Department, Kurt Scobie, come up first. And then after that, we're going to hear a very short summary from Veolia, and then we're going to hear the presentation from Dump Veolia, and then we're going to have everyone that has signed up on these sheets to speak next. Thank you. How are you this evening?
Just fine. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. In March 2008, the City of St. Louis adjusted the water rates. This ordinance was to increase the water rates effective July 1st by 19%, starting April 1st, 2008. 11% effective July 1st, 2009, the beginning of the fiscal year 2010. Due in part to national economic conditions, a decline in the number of affected accounts, and a significant decrease in water usage, total water operating revenue did not come in as expected from these water rate increases. This less than expected revenue increase prompted the need to review revenue and revenue requirements and adequacy of projected debt service coverage. Additionally, we were faced with unanticipated and unprecedented cost increases, primarily in treatment chemical costs. It appeared that the Water Division would not meet its minimum debt service coverage requirement in the fiscal year 2011 or any subsequent year afterwards, and the Water Department would experience complete depletion of all funds balances by the end of fiscal year 2011. On June 11th, 2010, the Water Division filed a board bill to raise the rates another 21% in 2010 and 14% in 2011. This was on top of the previous rate increases we just had. The Board of Aldermen and the City of St. Louis Water Division customers were not pleased when faced with yet again another set of water rate increases. At the insistence of the Board of Aldermen and the Water Division customers, the city only increased the water rates by 12% in July 2010. This rate increase helped us meet our immediate needs. After our last rate increase and pushback from our customers, we came away with the understanding that we needed to be as efficient in our operation as possible. In addition to this water rate increase, the Water Division and its employees sought and implemented cost savings efficiencies. We as a utility reduced overtime, temporary reassigned employees to address seasonal and temporary work needs, left positions vacant, reduced our number of employees, refinanced our existing bonds, rebid contracts when it was to our advantage to do so, and deferred capital improvements. We did this while maintaining affordable and high-quality water to our customers. In addition to the cost-saving measures, it was also clear that we needed an outside firm to take a look at us and assist us in additional efficiencies and increased revenues. We came away from our conversations over the last rate increase of that we had to go and demonstrate that we were as efficient as possible to best utilize the funds that our customers provide us. However, the Water Division is still faced with possibility of increasing water rates yet again. Water rates increases are inevitable. The City of St. Louis Water Division is continually evolving to address increasing regulatory requirements, elevated customer service level expectations, business demands, declining economy and customer base, inflation, dynamic workforce, new technologies, and emerging concerns. The Water Division is placing a greater emphasis on improving business practice to address these issues. The City Water Division is recognized for providing superior water quality to their customers based on at a very competitive rate. However, there is a desire to engage specific enterprise expertise to assist in its efforts to consistently improve. Therefore, the Water Division issued a request for proposals for this purpose. The objective of the proposal contract with Veolia is to utilize their expertise in water systems operations. Their experience and expertise can provide insight and new ideas, programs, and approaches on ways to increase the water division's efficiencies without layoffs and/or revenues in order to postpone or lessen future water rate increases and improve customer satisfaction. The city and the water division retain the right whether or not to implement the recommendations. If they choose to implement any or all the recommendations, the city and the water division retain the right as to when, who, or how the recommendations are implemented.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. I'm going to just ask you, because this is probably one of the top questions that I've had is, do you believe this contract in any way is the process of beginning to sell the water department?
No, it is not.
Is it in any way for the city to not have responsibility to the water department and contract this out to someone else?
No, it is not.
Okay. And is your understanding that the only way that the water department could be sold or contracted out, it would have to be through a charter change from a vote from the public?
That's correct. That's my understanding.
Okay, that is my understanding here. I would just want to state the Board of Aldermen is not, we're not behind the sale nor the contracting of the water department. We believe that you've done everything you could, and all your employees, because they service our wards every day, to provide us with the best quality water. We take pride that we are probably one of the #1 water producers as far as the quality of our water in the country. I do not drink bottled water. I'll say that because I do believe that we do have some of the best tasting water across the country. At this time, Alderman, do you have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Kurt.
Thank you.
At this time, I call Kate Logan. If you have on, while we're switching, your phones are on, could you please turn your phone off at this time? And will Kate Logan Smith please approach the podium? Ms. Logan is doing a 10 to 15 minute presentation with the Coalition for Veolia.
I was going to do a presentation for the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. Yeah, Dan's going to do it, Dan Pearson, for the Dump Veolia Coalition. So.
Okay, let me see where we are here. Where did Dan sign in? Dan Pearson?
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity for the Dump Veolia Coalition to voice some of our concerns. The Dump Veolia Coalition opposes any contract between the City of St. Louis and Veolia that involves our water division. Our coalition enjoys support from a diverse and growing group of organizations, including the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, the St. Louis Palestine Solidarity Committee, the Sierra Club Eastern Missouri Group, Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice, Corporate Accountability International, the 15th Ward Democrats, the Council for American Islamic Relations, Missouri Muslims for Civic Engagement, St. Louis Jewish Voice for Peace, St. Louis University Justice for Palestine, the Instead of War Coalition, Organization for Black Struggle, and Missourians Organizing for Reform and Empowerment. Over 3,000 people have signed our petition, and hundreds of residents have taken the time to contact members of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment and their own aldermen and alderwomen on this issue. The Dump Veolia Coalition is aware that our city's water department has serious needs. We don't oppose change. We oppose hiring Veolia. The St. Louis Water Department is known for its quality and great service. A recent statement by James Coomer, the fiscal manager for the Water Division, asserts that employees have taken a system with 0 reserves 3 years ago and built it back to a financially healthy state. According to Coomer, this was accomplished internally without any outside management assistance. Why do we oppose a contract with Veolia? In short, we oppose working with Veolia because the company's record. Veolia Water North America is a subsidiary of the Veolia Environment, a Paris-based multinational corporation and the largest water privatization business in the world. Worldwide, consumers report that Veolia has consistently hiked up rates, provides poor service, causes staff turnover, discourages water conservation, and fails to implement promised improvements. Its history reveals consistent prioritization of profit at the expense of the environment and public welfare. Some examples of this: in its proposal to the St. Louis Water Division, Veolia extensively referenced its work in Indianapolis as a successful model that could inform Veolia's guidance in St. Louis. However, the company's 20-year contract with Indianapolis was terminated by the city less than halfway through. Non-union employees claimed that the company cut retirement plans, health care, and other benefits, costing the workers more than $50 million over 25 years. Veolia was sued for breaking state contract law and for overcharging 250,000 residents. Consumer complaints doubled, and the utility sought rate hikes of more than 35%. If Veolia gave us Indianapolis as an example of a success story, what could a failure possibly look like? Well, it might look like Whitesburg, Kentucky, where the water was found to contain unsafe levels of diesel fuel. The plant was equipped with a carbon feeder system that removes hydrocarbons from the water, but according to a Veolia spokesperson, the carbon feeder was only run when taste and smell was an issue because it was too expensive to run constantly. This is not the kind of cost-saving measures we want in St. Louis. It might also look like Richmond, California, where Veolia was hired to cut costs and to develop and implement an improvement plan for the city's sewer and stormwater systems. 4 years later, they had not even finished designing the plan, and the city and Veolia were sued for dumping more than 17 million gallons of raw sewage into the San Francisco Bay. Richmond taxpayers had to pay millions in settlements while Veolia continued to dump sewage into the waterways. Or it might look like, or smell like, Lynn, Massachusetts did when it was blanketed with stench due to sewer overflows and flooding as a result of poor design and workmanship of system upgrades, and because Veolia refused to properly treat the wastewater. The city ended the contract because Veolia failed to stay adequately bonded for the project. The city of Lynn was left liable for $22 million in expenses to clean up the mess. These are just a few of the communities across the U.S. and Europe that have had the misfortune of entering into contracts with Veolia. Around the room, if people want to hold up the sign, you'll see some of the other communities that wish their city officials had dumped Veolia from their start. Veolia's international human rights violations motivate many of our coalition members. We are concerned that Veolia supports systematic segregation and discriminatory practices targeting Palestinians by offering support in the form of wastewater treatment to illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank, operating bus systems on segregated roads, and by operating a landfill that dumps trash from Israel and its settlements on Palestinian farmers' and families' lands. In fact, the United Nations Special Rapporteur Richard Falk has recommended that Veolia, quote, should be boycotted until they bring their operations into line with international human rights and humanitarian law and standards. We are repeatedly told that this is just a consulting contract, right? But we wonder why Veolia would spend so much time and money on a sustained, aggressive public relations campaign costing untold tens of thousands of dollars for a measly $250,000 contract. It's clear from the contract they wrote for the city that they have much more in mind for us. The current contract makes numerous references to a Phase 2 implementation. City Attorney Mr. Garvin pointed out last week that the Phase 2 does not, legally speaking, need to be approved by the ENA. We are concerned that Veolia intends to use this contract in order to gain a foothold in a city with top-rated water, in a region with an abundance of fresh water, in a country where fresh water is increasingly scarce. We learned last week that the city attorney had not even seen the original contract with Veolia, much less negotiated, until recently. We find it frightening that the original version was nearly approved by the ENA and certainly would have been were it not for public opposition. This says a lot about the sort of company Veolia is. They will try to do, and do, get away with as much as they possibly can until enough people are hurt and they are made to stop. The main issue is not the wording of the details of the current contract. The issue is Veolia and its disastrous record on the environment, labor, human rights, service, mismanagement, breaking promises, negligence, and more. Our water department may need help, but it does not need Veolia's help, even if the contract were nothing more than seeking advice. Veolia is still the wrong choice. Water is one of our city's most important assets. No one doubts that. Its reliability, quality, and affordability is critical to our residents, our hospitals, our breweries, our restaurants, our businesses, our hotels, and our schools. Veolia's record in the U.S. and around the world is deeply flawed. The concerns we have named so far are but a few, and I am just one member of this coalition. So with that, I would like to yield to one of the other members of our coalition to speak to the issues in slightly more detail.
He's
Thank
still
you.
within his time frame.
Thank you, Alderwoman Flowers, for hosting this hearing tonight. And thank you to everyone who is here to support St. Louis Water. My name is Kathleen Logan Smith. I'm the Environmental Policy Director for the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. I live in the city of St. Louis, and city water is essential to my life and the people and the pets, the children and the neighbors, the friends that I love. I'm here today asking you to help St. Louis reject a contract with Veolia. I first came to know Veolia for its operation of the hazardous waste incinerator in Sauget, Illinois, and it is a company's record there that raised my initial concerns about its interest in our drinking water. On September 27, 2006, Veolia Environmental Services in Sauget was issued notice of violations for breaking federal environmental laws. The violations demonstrate a disregard for public safety, for rules, for standards, for good procedures, for effective training. Specifically, Veolia was cited for uncontrolled emissions, failure to operate equipment to prevent releases of hazardous air pollutants, improper monitoring for leak detection and repair, failure to operate equipment in a manner consistent with good air pollution control. And I ask you, do we want a company that manages hazardous waste poorly just across the river to manage our drinking water? This year, EPA has reopened the Veolia air permit at its hazardous waste incinerator in Sauget. EPA found it necessary to beef up monitoring of Veolia's facility there to ensure compliance after finding the company's data to be unreliable. And I ask you, do we want a company whose data is unreliable to be near our drinking water? My familiarity with Veolia's hazardous waste record contributes to my distrust of Veolia and prompted deeper investigations into the way the company does business elsewhere. The Lexington, Kentucky Herald Leader published the account on February 22nd that illustrates how Veolia prioritizes its responsibilities to the public when the upstream diesel fuel spill into the river threatened to taint the water supply. Customers woke up to the smell of petroleum in their tap water Saturday morning on February 12th. A no-contact order was in effect for over 3 days, during which customers could use water only to flush toilets. They were told they couldn't use it for their laundry. Restaurants had to use bottled water to cook, to wash dishes, even to clean their floors, and to deal with their food, which added additional Valentine's Day hardship to the restaurants in the town. The carbon filter that would have removed the diesel fuel was shut down multiple times. And the spokesman actually did tell the newspaper that it was expensive to run that filter constantly. They were saving money. They were pinching pennies. They were issued a notice of violation at Whitesburg because there was a problem with the proper operation of the Whitesburg plant, and actions that could have prevented the passage of fuel through the plant were not taken. St. Louis cannot afford a company that puts penny pinching ahead of public health and safety, no matter how much money we need to save. Veolia says it wants to do in St. Louis what it did in Indianapolis, so let's review that case. Because Indiana has a state utility regulatory commission that oversees and must approve rate hikes, the public gets a rare glimpse into how it does business. Veolia entered into a 20-year, $1.2 billion contract with $300 million in additional incentives with Indianapolis to run its water system on March 21, 2002. We're providing documents from that commission to you to read. You'll see that Indianapolis had big problems with its water system when it started, and nearly 10 years of Veolia management failed to solve them. And I'm going to hit the highlights here. The LA Times reported in 2006, within the first year, customer complaints nearly tripled, and the company admitted mailing more than 15,000 incorrect bills. Inadequate maintenance caused hundreds of fire hydrants to freeze, hampering efforts to put out fires that consumed a church and other buildings. Then on January 6, 2005, heavy rains swelled the White River and triggered a chain of system failures at the White River treatment plant. Officials issued a boil water advisory. 40,000 school children took an unscheduled holiday, and residents of the nation's 12th largest city learned they could no longer take their tap water for granted. A federal grand jury, meanwhile, is investigating allegations that Veolia's Indianapolis unit falsified water quality data. Things were tough in Indianapolis. Veolia promised Indianapolis no rate hikes for 5 years, and that was a sweet deal for the politicians who helped push it through, though it wasn't very realistic given the condition of the water utility. And after that 5-year rate freeze expired, they sought several rate hikes that were partially granted by the regulators. The first of several rate hikes began with a 27% rate hike for most folks, or more for some heavy users like the zoo. And by the end of Veolia's service, when the contract was terminated in 2011, water customers experienced rate hikes almost every year. In 2009, it was 12%. In 2010, it was 26%. In 2011, it was 17%. After the 5-year rate freeze, the Utility Regulatory Commission noted that Veolia went to Indianapolis and extracted extra compensation for, quote, past unexpected expenses. And they got a 5% fee hike through an amendment to the management agreement. They did this without commission approval, something the commission calls disturbing. In fact, the Utility Regulatory Commission never reviewed nor never approved the management agreement or its amendment before they were adopted. The fact that Veolia violated a commission order by not submitting the amendment for review suggests a disregard for rules and regulations, oversight, and scrutiny that is echoed throughout the company's operations and its record elsewhere. The commission tagged the payments for unexpected past expenses as illegal retroactive rate making. One of Indianapolis's former water department board members, Mr. Michael Hudson, who had served 7 years on the board and been its secretary-treasurer, testified in 2011 that Veolia threatened litigation if the original agreement were not amended. Veolia's David Gaddis testified that Veolia did not threaten litigation. In any case, Veolia had been squeezed under the promises it made to Indianapolis and bit off more than it could chew. We should note that St. Louis does not have a Utility Regulatory Commission oversight watchdog to monitor this process. We've already proven that external independent oversight is needed because it was our scrutiny at the Missouri Coalition for the Environment of the first draft of the contract that flagged the giveaway of the city's rights. How many independent third-party St. Louis lawyers will need to be involved to evaluate Veolia's contracts, billing plans, and subcontracts? St. Louis cannot afford the additional workload of keeping Veolia ethical. One of the big concerns about this deal, and I can't read this whole statement if you're going to hold us to this time, Madam Chairwoman, but one of the important things to consider about this deal is how Phase 2 eliminates competition. It eliminates competitive bidding, and competitive bidding is a respected way to keep costs down. And in Indianapolis, the regulators there suggested that these capital projects go to competitive bidding, and that's not what Veolia does, and that's not what they want to do, and that's not what they aim to do. And so it shuts out competitors across our community and across the state of Missouri who might be able to deliver these projects better, faster, and cheaper than Veolia. Getting into a Phase 1 contract with them is a huge, huge mistake.
Thank you, Ms. Logan. Does anyone from the committee have any questions for either Dan or Kate Logan? Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call David Reed. I'm just trying to go pro and con. So I don't know, I can't tell which one of you all from Veolia have signed up to speak on that, but I just saw Veolia as a pro behind his name.
Hi, my name is David Reed, and I am currently the Assistant Project Manager for Veolia Water in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is right across the river. I'm very, very happy to be employed by Veolia Water. It is absolutely the best company I have ever worked for in my life. We in Edwardsville have an excellent working relationship with the city of Edwardsville. Our management and staff is very, very proud of our record as far as regarding environmental compliance, safety record, and also very much in cost savings for the city of Edwardsville. One example of safety record is we just, as of yesterday, celebrated 26 years without a lost time accident. We've also, throughout the years, performed several projects upgrading the water treatment plant to help provide the city with more cost savings. In Edwardsville, we have the water treatment plant, which we operate and manage, the wastewater treatment plant, and also the lift stations. Basically, in summary, I, along with the staff in Edwardsville, Illinois, are very proud and very supportive of this project with the City of St. Louis Water Division, and we take great pride and great effort on a daily basis to make sure we are in environmental compliance, safety compliance, and we've also achieved several water quality awards through the Illinois EPA, and in summary, very much in support of Veolia Water.
Thank you, David. Okay, who is doing the presentation from Veolia? There you are. Okay, I'm just out of fairness, and last time I gave each one of you 5 minutes, what ended up being 10 minutes, so I don't know if they want to give you the full 10, but it will basically go in the same way that we're proceeding tonight.
So there were three presenters, so we would get
Well,
15 minutes.
they had two, and you had two last time. Because remember, I cut the third person off, okay, and just let them answer questions if the alderman had any questions. So we're going to start with your 5 minutes, and you can go and start now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and other officials and elected officials as well. Again, as you were here last week, as many of you know, my name is David Gaddis. I'm the Executive Vice President of Veolia Water North America. I am also the former president of Veolia Water Indianapolis, also known as Indianapolis Water Company as well. I thank you very much again for this opportunity to stand before you and to address whatever concerns that you may have, but as well talk to you this evening about we at Veolia, who we are and what we stand for on a day-to-day basis. As many of you know, Veolia is a large company, and we do the best that we can on a day-to-day basis. But I do have to tell you, some of the things I've heard here today are just not true. It's disturbing to hear what I've heard today. As I look around the room, I see some of the signs. The signs are cities that we don't do business in. We've never done business in. Some of the signs, we continue to have contracts with those cities. So this is very, very disturbing for me that, you know, the organization that I have a lot of pride in would be attacked in the way that it is being attacked this evening. This is a consulting contract. That's all that it is. But one thing before my 5 minutes is up, I do want to talk about Indianapolis. I was responsible for Indianapolis. I take pride in Indianapolis. I'm born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. My grandfather worked for that utility from 1931 to 1962. My father worked for that utility from 1961 to 2001. I worked for that utility from 1997 until 2011. I have a lot of pride in that utility. and that utility means a lot to me. And the things that you've heard tonight, they're not true. Just flat out not true. We were not kicked out of Indianapolis. As I stated in the last meeting, the mayor of Indianapolis made a decision that he wanted to sell his utility to a not-for-profit, which was Citizens Gas. Great choice on his part. It's what he wanted to do and what he had the authority to do, and he did that. But with that, what he had a contract before him that was with Veolia, and it was a binding contract. And there was stipulations in the contract that talked about if you wanted to get out of the contract, that's fine, but there is a payment that must be made. And the city of Indianapolis stood by its word, and they made that payment. And we at Veolia appreciated that. And we still today work with the city of Indianapolis in many, many ways. But the other thing I want to say about the city of Indianapolis is the things that you heard about as far as complaints go and so forth and so on, we were nothing but the operator of the utility. It was up to the board of directors and also the city of Indianapolis to make some of these forwards over to the utility commission that people talked about, and they were made. And I went before the utility commission myself. And so the things that you hear are not true. We have a great record in Indianapolis. We did a great job in the customer service call center. We reduced wait times from 10 minutes and 15 minutes down to 30 seconds. 85% of the calls were answered within 30 seconds. You know, we had customer complaints that went from, during the months of July and August, because of the stagnant odor in the reservoir, they went from 1,500 complaints a month down to 5. There were so many good things that happened in Indianapolis. If we had not done a good job in Indianapolis, we would not be able to use them as a reference. Mayor Greg Ballard gives us a great reference. The former Mayor Bart Peterson gives us a great record. So the things that you hear this evening regarding Indianapolis are just flat out wrong. And so I had a different thing that I was going to talk about tonight. I was going to talk about a lot about what I talked about last week and about Veolia, but I just had to stand before you, and I know I'm getting close to my 5 minutes, but I really wanted to tell you that the things that you hear this evening, they're alarming to me, and they're bothersome. And so I would like to yield whatever time I have, plus the 5 minutes, to our Director of Corporate Communications, Scott Edwards. But one last thing that I do want to say to this group is that we have before us a revolution stirring in North America. Across the nation, there are cities, and those that are governing them are taking on big issues, like you're taking on this evening. It is up to you to solve those issues, because we have a government in Washington, D.C. that can't or won't solve those issues. It's up to you to fix the economy, the infrastructure that you have in front of you. And we at Veolia just want to be a part of that.
Thank you,
I
David.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was your 5 minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes, would you like to ask him a question?
are we asking questions?
Yes, you
or-
can. Why don't we, go ahead, David, if you come back up, someone from the committee has a question for you. I'm sorry, I didn't ask. Go ahead, Alderman Cone.
Mr. Gaddis, I actually have a couple of questions for you. One, I'd like to inquire as to if anyone within your organization had a responsibility for drafting the contract that's currently before the Board of Estimate and Apportionment.
And when you say drafting the contract, I guess I know what contract you're talking about, but when you say, did we write the contract for the city?
Well,
the answer would be no.
The format of this is not something that I've typically seen come before aldermanic committees before. And also, I brought up in last week's hearing, the non-discrimination policy that's in place here does not include sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression, which has been adopted, sexual orientation, since the 1990s in the city of St. Louis. So it would be highly unlikely that a city councilor would have drafted that addendum, given that we've had sexual orientation included in our non-discrimination policy for over 15 years at this point in time,
Yes,
since
sir.
1996.
Yes, and I think it's a great question, but I think that the city attorney and also the COO last week addressed your question, and that was...
Not entirely, actually.
Well, here's what I would say. We did not write that contract. Are we negotiating? Do we ask for things to be in contracts? Yes. We do.
I guess my question is the source of the contract, not, I understand that, when you're in legal discussions with other folks, you go back and forth, there's going to be input on both sides. That's part of negotiation. But the source of the contract, are you familiar with where this initially originated from?
No, I'm not.
So I guess my two other questions at this time would be, one, kind of going back to the comment I just made, what are Veolia's non-discrimination policies? Do you all include sexual orientation in your non-discrimination policy? Do you include gender identity and expression?
We do, sir.
Can I get a copy of that at some point in time?
There's no problem with you getting that at all.
And I'm also...
And if I could say one other thing addressing that question you just asked, we also have a very, very inclusive diversity, inclusion, and innovation policy as well. We have a senior management team that heads up that committee, and then below the senior management team, there are other groups that carry through and make sure that that occurs. We also have many, many different groups and affinity groups within our organization with the full breadth of everything that you just spoke to. And I think if you'll check our record regarding discrimination and these sort of things, you will find that Veolia has a stellar record there.
Well, I'm asking you to provide me with a copy of the policy.
Not an
Could you
issue.
please email that to me? I'll make sure the members of the committee get
I
that.
appreciate that.
We will do that.
Any more questions, Alderman?
I have one other question at this time. Is Veolia also a labor-friendly organization? Do you all have unions that are working, in terms of maintenance, and not just on, the trade side of things, but also in customer service positions, whether it's Teamsters or SEIU or other, organizations that work with?
Yes, sir, we do. And part of our reference that we give to many cities, and the same that we gave to St. Louis, include references from those unions that we have worked with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Boyd, you have a question?
Well, you're good.
I just saw you moving. I knew it was coming.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Gaddis, out of fairness, when they talk about Indianapolis and you work there and you're proud to use them as a reference, we have several documents. Some are pro, some are against Veolia. Do you have a letter of support from the mayor of Indianapolis in support of Veolia?
We can get that for you. Most of the time what happens is, if we submit something to a client, they would rather get it themselves. So they call the mayor's office and get that information from them. But if you would like for us to get that letter of reference from both of the mayors and also from the chairman of the board as well of Indianapolis Water, we're more than happy to get that for you.
I think in light of the fact that you're proud to use them as a reference, that we really should be able to see some type of document to support,
Yes.
what you're saying.
Well, and I would say this as well, sir. If I could just add this, the selection committee also contacted Indianapolis as the reference and got that reference. So they did their due diligence with Indianapolis as all of the contracts that we have. New York City that we have a contract with. There's not a sign out here in New York City. We have a contract with them. They checked our references. Indianapolis was one of them. LADWP, Los Angeles, not a sign out here for that, but they checked our references as well. And the list goes on and on and on. But, sir, I will definitely get you those letter of references.
Thank you, sir. No
Thank
further
you.
questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
He so-called yielded his time to you, but he really kind of took a little chunk into it. So let's just go ahead and get started.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Scott Edwards. I'm Executive Vice President of Communications for Veolia Water North America, and I'd like to address a number of the issues that have been raised, and perhaps we can do that through the evening. I really appreciate the passion that exists in this room. We are equally passionate about what we do. And I'm, very pleased to answer as many questions as we possibly can this evening. Like David, I'm frustrated with some of these signs, and I'm going to point out a few just to kick things off. The first one is Burlingame, California, and I would encourage everyone to contact the city of Burlingame, California. We just renewed our contract. We have absolutely the longest standing and one of the absolutely best public-private partnerships in the U.S. in the history of water management. And I'm glad to provide a quote from their Public Works Director. They just issued a proclamation in favor and celebrating more than 30 years of a public-private partnership. That's a customer. Lee, Massachusetts is not a customer, and the gentleman's holding a sign that says, "We were rejected by Lee, Massachusetts," and we were. And in fact, that one angers me. It angers me because if you know Lee, Massachusetts, you know that that is a blue-collar working town, and their victory in rejecting Veolia cost each citizen $1,700 per head. And when you think about the working families and what we as a company could have done and the financial impact, we're extremely proud about our record and our accomplishments, and that is exactly what we don't want to happen. I'm going to try to touch on some environmental issues. I want to address labor. I want to speak to privatization, and I want to correct a number of mischaracterizations, misstatements, and flat-out misinformation that's been occurring since we were first selected 8 months ago in a competitive bid. Regarding, environment, for those who question our environmental record, we can only point to the facts that are on the record, and our track record is exemplary, and that is exactly why cities ranging from New York City, which is a world-class utility, to Honolulu selects Veolia Water for support, either in managing or in helping manage through a peer performance solution like we're offering to St. Louis. It's exactly why the world's leading companies, from ExxonMobil to Anheuser-Busch, choose Veolia for service or for technology to support their operations. Now, detractors will consider 8,500 water and wastewater plants that we operate around the world, and they'll come with a handful or two handfuls of activity that's occurred over a 10-year period and say that that's their evidence, but they don't consider what happened before we got there. They don't consider the many hundreds and thousands of projects that are in full compliance, and they don't consider what's happening across the country, which maybe we can address later in the evening. Our environmental record, our compliance, exceeds 99% with our operating permits throughout North America.
Yeah, one more minute.
And the truth is that without comparative data, any disparagement of our record is meaningless and reveals more about the bias of the accuser. Our clients know this because our compliance levels are their compliance levels, and they know that we're saving their communities hundreds of millions of dollars because their costs are stabilized. They know that our employee safety record is by far the industry's best, and they know that our contract renewal rate with our customers exceeds 90% because of the accomplishments. A number of mischaracterizations have occurred on websites and in editorials. Will we have time, Madam Chair, to address some of these as
Well, let me ask you
responses
this.
to questions?
Had you ever been to any of the Board of E&A meetings when this contract was before the Board of E&A? Had anyone represented?
I personally was not.
Veolia? So this isn't the first time you've seen the signs? Okay, so welcome to City Hall. This is
Okay.
called politics.
Right.
And this
So-
is just how things get done here, so.
Right.
At this time, Scott, we do have to get through this list. Usually there's pros and cons, but a whole lot more cons. So because you all were able to speak the last meeting, I didn't know you all were actually coming back until the end. We'll give you opportunity at the end, but at this time, we really understand that this is the public input. And this will go back to the Board of E&A. Everyone will have the opportunity to contact the members of the Board of E&A, but this really isn't about capturing, correcting. This is about being heard tonight, okay? So as I said last time, we couldn't keep going back and forth. If at this time there's any alderman that have any questions of Scott,
Yes.
okay, go ahead, Alderman Ogilvie.
I do think it is difficult to litigate the entire history of a giant company in the frame of this contract. And I would caution that our own sewer utility, MSD, is constantly discharging sewage. They did it 2 weeks ago into the Mississippi River. So we're all capable of screwing this stuff up. But just to get to the contract, I feel like we've spent a lot of time talking about everything, the language in the contract, the history of the company, you know, everything except what is Veolia going to do to reduce costs, improve service, or increase revenue, thank you, Alderman, for the St. Louis Water Division. Can we please just talk about what's going to happen?
Steve Siegfried.
Yes, I'm Steve Siegfried, and I'm going to be the study manager. What's going to happen is we're going to bring in a team of subject matter experts who are going to be looking at the water use, chemicals, the electric, looking at the trying to create a sustainable situation for the utility. Looking at reducing costs, probably 10 to 15%. And we're going to do that by coming in and studying very, very closely, doing a top-down analysis, identifying where savings can take place, and then doing a full business case assessment, a deep dive into areas that look like they should provide some very significant savings. That's how the study works.
Okay, so I think for the benefit of everyone here, it would be extremely helpful to tell us about a similar city and give me one very specific example of something Veolia has implemented in another municipal water division that improved service, reduced costs, or increased revenue.
Several pop to mind immediately, but the one that I just read about recently, in New York City, the dosing of fluoride is a regulated item by the New York State DEP. And the fluoride dosing, instead of tracking with the flow, the dosing was going up and down. Sometimes you'd have a 0.7, sometimes you'd have a 1.0, sometimes you'd have a 1.1. We've installed a feedback monitor that adjusted the dosing pump. That has it tracking right at 0.7 all the time. By not overdosing the fluoride, we saved $350 million with about a $50,000 investment in equipment. $350,000 over the course of the year, which is going to be sustainable going forward into the future. Return on investment was, 2 months? That's the type of thing that we do all the time.
Just for the record, the saving was $350,000, not $350 million.
$350,000, I'm sorry,
Right.
yes. With a $50,000 investment.
But if we could add, in New York City, we've targeted and identified, the city takes their experts, we take our experts, sit at a table, go through all the processes in the water and wastewater system, and we've identified jointly, because it's one team working together, it's not Veolia. Many of the ideas are held here in St. Louis or in New York. We've already identified $130 million in annual in financial benefits. So this is something that's a meaningful savings, and in St. Louis, we believe we can save up to 15%.
Okay, Alderman,
Thank you.
I have about 30-something people on the list at 5 minutes, unless you want to be here until about 10 o'clock. We need to get to this list, okay? Thank you very much. I'm going to stay on this sheet. Renee Marver. Ms. Khan. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. I am a member of what is known as the Consumer Council of Missouri and the Board of Directors. I do live in the city of St. Louis, proud resident, and also feel that we're fortunate to have such quality water. So we are looking at this as we do have some strengths in our current situation, but we do question some of what may happen in the process of selecting a consultant contract to begin working and making some changes. We act on behalf of the citizens of the state, and specifically we look at protecting utility consumption and consumers. So this is a very important issue for us. We are pleased that the city is looking also at improving a situation that could cost residents more in the long run without some changes. We do think as well that not only operations need to be improved, but economic efficiencies within the water division. And we're pleased to see that options are being sought through getting more advice, getting more expertise into the consulting, among consulting sources. However, as we've heard this evening, we are concerned and we feel that you need to look very more seriously at the proposal before you, that because of what we've learned from other cities in their experience, that we need to take caution. Our organization has some principles that I'd like to share with you briefly, but we think apply to this situation. We believe that the city should be careful of going down a pathway that is not responsive to the public, that lessens the ability of the public to be involved, and that could currently affect the quality of the water. We do not want to see that changed. We feel the quality of the water must be maintained, and we hope that the city and its elected representatives will continue to be ultimately responsible for that quality through including treatment and testing of the water. Equally important is that the city continue to be ultimately responsible for setting the water rates, and that that are paid by city residents. The city should be wary of any contract that defers its operational or rate-setting responsibilities to an unregulated and unelected entity. We noticed in the contract that the company is offering to set up its own subcontracts without bids. We consider that to be a very serious flaw, and we would like that to be looked at. We urge the city to insist on the practice of taking bids, whether it is for the contractor or subcontractors, to be always followed.
Ms. Marver, you have 1 minute.
Okay. The city should ensure that its residents are not denied the economic benefit of future operation cost savings. St. Louis City's municipal water system rate structure currently does not contain private profits. Please be wary of incentives or shared saving arrangements that unfairly divert too much of its savings away from the St. Louisans who are being served. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share our concerns.
We appreciate your input. Thank you. Nobody looks like any questions? Okay. Hetty Epstein. Did I say that right? Okay, if you could pull the microphone down so everyone can hear everything you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Hetty Epstein. I'm a resident of St. Louis, and I enjoy drinking the city's excellent water every single day. I want to bring up an issue that hasn't been mentioned this evening. I am Jewish, and so I'm bringing in the fact that Veolia operates in Israel and in Palestine, and many Israelis believe that discontinuing business with companies such as Veolia until they change the nature of their involvement in Israel-Palestine, it is a necessary and positive step towards peace. Veolia is extremely unpopular in Israel and in Palestine, and recently the J14 social justice movement has occupied the light rail to express outrage over the privatization of public spaces and services that Veolia is involved in. I support dumping Veolia. It is not true that bringing up this issue is harmful to the local Jewish community, to Israel, and it is also not anti-Semitic to be for dumping Veolia. I believe that our city, my city, St. Louis, work with an ethical company that follows national and international laws. And even though members of the ENA are perhaps not present this evening, I urge that at the next ENA meeting, ENA dump Veolia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Epstein. Please, I know it's good, it's going to get good to you, but please hold the applause. Do you have a question, Alderman?
Madam Chairman, tell me again who she represented.
Ms. Epstein, can you please say who you're representing again? Could you mention the...
I represent essentially myself, but I'm also a member of the Palestine Solidarity Committee and Jewish Voice for Peace, and the IOW, the Instead of War Coalition.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Can you stay there for a moment, please? Are you familiar with the Jewish Community Relations Council, right?
Am I familiar with them? Yes.
And they submitted a letter. And in the letter, it says, we reject the approach of those who seek instead to inflame the conflict and to act it out here in the United States. We reject the approach of those who insert the Palestine-Israel conflict into our local politics. This approach is inappropriate, unjust, and ultimately detrimental to peace in the Middle East and to the good relations in St. Louis.
I think there's someone here that's supposed to, from the organization, to read that letter. Am I not correct?
I don't represent the Jewish community or the Jewish Community Relations Council.
Okay, I was just wondering if you understood their position.
Yes, I understand their position, and I'm opposed to their position.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Epstein.
Because first I thought I couldn't figure out you were for it or against it based on this letter that I
Oh,
read,
she's
so.
definitely on the con side. Paul Moriarty on the con side.
Hi, my name's Paul Moriarty. I'm a resident of St. Louis, and I own a house and a condo in St. Louis. And I also teach, I'm a philosophy professor, and I teach in a human rights program at a university out in St. Louis County. There were several concerns that I had about this contract with Veolia. I'm very concerned about Veolia's environmental record in Sauget and other places, and I'm concerned about the role of a private company in managing our water here in St. Louis. But the issue that really initially raised my concern was the issue of Veolia's role in aiding the Israeli government in the occupation in Palestine. And I realize that this is a sort of global issue. I remember hearing the mayor say, well, this doesn't concern us here in St. Louis. We're just worried about our local water here. But, I do tell my students when we're talking about human rights issues that what happens in the rest of the world that we are connected to the rest of the world. And I just want to say that, I think if we were doing business, when I was younger, I was part of the anti-apartheid movement. And I think that if we were doing business back then with a company that was supporting the apartheid government of South Africa, we would have recognized that that was a concern for us on the local level. And so I do want to say that we have an obligation, I think, to refuse to do business with companies that violate human rights. And so I urge the Board of E&A to dump Veolia at their next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a leap on the pro side because there's not many of you. Is Jeff Gratzer? Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Jeff Gratzer. I work for Jacobs Engineering. Jacobs is a firm that has a large office here in the city of St. Louis. We've been in the city either as Jacobs or our previous companies, Frederick Civil, for over 70 years. We have about 350 people that work in downtown St. Louis. I've been in St. Louis myself for about 16 years. We're on the Veolia team because we feel they have the expertise and the knowledge to identify solutions for the city to consider and for the city to take those and decide whether or not they want to implement those improvements to keep costs down and to keep rates affordable for the citizens of St. Louis. So I'm in support of bringing Veolia on to assist the city. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you. Steve?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I was wondering, is David Geddes planning on staying for the whole hearing, or?
David, are you planning on staying for the whole hearing? Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Steve Tamari? Hello, Steve, go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Board of Aldermen. My name is Steve Tamari. I'm a member of the St. Louis Religious Society of Friends, Quakers, and we worship in Soulard on Park Avenue, I'm a teacher and a Palestinian American, and our community as a Palestinian American is part of a growing Muslim American immigrant community in the city. My general concerns as relates to the awarding of such a contract to such a company have to do with the globalized world that we live in. Some of those who support awarding this contract to Veolia want us to believe that the matter is purely operational and local, and that controversy about what Veolia is alleged to have done in other parts of the country or in other parts of the world or in the past is just that, a controversy. The fact is that that we are part of a globalized world, as somebody else just said, and that our city is part of a bigger world. We know that this without even having to try hard. Immigration from other parts of the world has enriched us. Global financial troubles affect all of us. Outsourcing of jobs, for example, affects all of us. And multinational corporations wanting to take over public utilities is a national and global phenomenon. Veolia is the world's largest water management company, and it has been willing and able for a long time now to be in violation of international law. One of the most egregious examples of their violation of international law is that they and their subsidiaries provide transportation, waste management, and other municipal services to illegal Israeli settlements on Palestinian land and that the Israeli military has occupied and confiscated from their Palestinian owners over the course of the last 4.5 decades. Since 2005, Palestinian grassroots organizations have mobilized a global movement styled on the divestment strategy of the South African struggle against apartheid to target companies that collude with the Israeli occupation. In this country, many communities of faith have mobilized to divest from Veolia and other companies that are complicit in the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. My small religious community, the Quakers, have always been at the forefront of such social movements. Quakers have a well-deserved reputation for being out front in such social movements. The Quakers, including their service arm, the American Friends Service Committee, and their financial arm, Friends Fiduciary, have divested from companies like Veolia that are part and parcel of the Israeli occupation. As a teacher, also, I'm a member, I have investments in TIAA-CREF, Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association, the College Retirement Equities Fund, and there's also a campaign among members of that fund, which covers people in the service industries and the medical professions, as well as teachers, and there's a large movement among us to have TIAA-CREF divest from holdings in Veolia. As a Palestinian American, I would hope that my city, St. Louis, will be on the right side of this global movement for human rights and respect for international law.
You have 1 minute.
There are definite local concerns that are key to how St. Louis water is managed. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking our city exists in a bubble. We can allow ourselves to get trapped within the claws of a global conglomerate that privatizes for profit, or we can be part of a global movement to resist that trend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. I have one chair up here I can offer someone, and I've just been looking through the audience to see if anyone is struggling. If you need to be seated, I have one chair I can provide for you. There's 2 ladies leaving. You have chairs over here. So if anyone needs to have a seat, or you have an open seat, okay. Dan Krosnoff. I say that somewhat right?
Dan Krasnoff is my name.
Krasnoff, okay.
I'm with the Jewish Community Relations Council. I'm the Associate Director of the JCRC. You have the letter. Alderman Boyd read much of my letter, which was disappointing to me, but I'm kidding. I do have a statement I'd like to read into the record.
Okay.
And that is that the St. Louis Jewish Community Relations Council is an umbrella organization of 29 organizations and agencies that is the public affairs arm of the St. Louis Jewish community. We are here today to express our deep concern at the insertion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict into local politics and the contract between St. Louis Water and Veolia. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is complex, and the road to peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians has been a long and painful process. We believe it is vital to support those who seek paths to end the conflict and to bring lasting peace to the Middle Eastern region. We reject the approach of those who seek instead to inflame the conflict and act it out here in the United States. We reject the approach of those who insert the Israeli-Palestinian conflict into local politics. The approach is inappropriate, unjust, and ultimately detrimental to peace in the Middle East and to the good relations in St. Louis. And I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Alderman Ogilvie.
Thank you, Alderman. Is it ever appropriate to consider the history of a company before entering into a contract with them, or is it just not appropriate in this case?
Well, that's a hypothetical. I think it's inappropriate in this case, and I suppose there are examples where it may have been appropriate in other circumstances, but I don't think it is in this one.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you very much. Phyllis Evans. Hello, Phyllis.
Hello, my name is Phyllis Evans. I live in the 17th Ward, and I want to thank you all for holding this public hearing tonight. obviously there's a lot of citizen interest in this topic. I came this evening because I strongly oppose the city signing a contract with a company that has such a poor environmental record. And basically I support the comments made by Kat Logan Smith and Dan Pearson at the beginning. I would like to note that the signs that I was able to see all have references on the back quoting where the information came from, so these are not just names thrown into the pot. And I hope that the E&A board will vote down and dump Veolia. Thank you.
Okay, so questions of Ms. Evans? We'll move on to the next. Richard, oh, I don't want to say that wrong. You say it.
My name is Richard Buteau,
Okay.
and I'm pleased to be a resident of the 15th Ward. Thank you very much for having this hearing. I must say I was saddened by your self-deprecating comments about the role of the committee, the role of the Board of Aldermen in this entire process. As you deprecate your role, unfortunately, since you are our legislative body, you deprecate the role of every citizen of St. Louis in that. I recognize the steps that have to be gone through. I strongly encourage you to recognize the number of voices, the volume of the voices, and speak on our behalf at the Board of E&A. That is where I would like to start. I want to address an aspect of this that I have not yet heard discussed. In the previous hearing last week, we talked a little bit about public outreach and how important it is to make the case that water issues are important, that what we're doing isn't working. We must do something different. Well, because I live in the 15th Ward, I am fortunately represented by Alderman Jennifer Florida, who has been very informative to us about the financial situation in the city of St. Louis. She is always filling us in on budget issues, and that is the reason I want no part of Veolia as a St. Louis contractor. We cannot afford to throw away $29 million or whatever our share of $29 million is to get out from under a contract we cannot abide. Veolia has promised savings. Mr. Ogilvie, you've asked a very good question. Where are we going to get the savings? Well, though none of us can predict the future, we can look at the past and get a pretty good idea. Rate increases, layoffs, neglected maintenance, compromised water quality. That is where the savings will come from. St. Louis cannot afford that. My next topic is just the financial stability of Veolia. 5 years ago, $60 a share. Today, $11 and change. Bloomberg News, the Financial Times of London, Wall Street Journal have all written stories about their drowning in debt, their dumping of assets, their trying to get out from under responsibilities that they have. I don't want St. Louis to have to pick up a share of a company that is too big to fail because we did not do our investigation before we engaged with them. This is very short, and I think I have time. From the Wall Street Journal Market Watch. Veolia Environment Thursday said cost reductions through its restructuring efforts helped it swing back to profit in the first half, even as the continued deterioration of the economic situation in Europe forced the group to book 89 million euros of write-downs in Italy. In this difficult context, we have decided to increase our cost reductions effort and reduce investments even more in the years ahead, said Veolia's chairman and chief executive Antoine Frérot in a statement. The group now plans to trim its investments by 500 million euros in the period from 2012 and 2013. It also expects to realize 270 million euros of gross cost cuts and 170 million euros of net cost cuts in this period, from an initial target of 220 million euros and 120 million respectively. Once this process is complete by 2014, the Veolia said it should post an organic growth rate above 3%. Well, I am a little farther in this. It goes into the investment analysts who say Veolia has missed every target they've announced, and they place no faith in Veolia's projections.
Thank you, Richard. Let me ask you a question. Have you been to any of the Board of VNA meetings?
I have not.
Okay. So
I cannot get there during the day.
So you really don't understand that when you're at a Board of VNA meeting, the only people that usually can speak are the members of the Board of VNA or who they call on.
Yes, I do understand that.
Okay, so even as alderpersons, we're really not allowed to speak unless we're asked a question or clarification. Do you understand that?
I fully understand within the meeting, yes.
Okay.
I'm not speaking within the meeting. I'm speaking of they must depend on your advice. They must value your advice.
Not necessarily.
Then are we all wasting our time? When we vote, are we wasting our time?
If you think that the whole process of this meeting even beginning when neither of us 29 aldermen down here really had to get in it at all, and you have an evening meeting at 6 p.m. we have this many aldermen that don't even sit on the committee and they have showed up to hear your voice, and you would normally not have this process at the Board of VNA. Do you think it's a waste of your time?
I don't think it's a waste of my time.
Okay, so this is not a waste of my time, nor is it a waste of our time. So we want to hear what you have to say.
I'm pleased to hear
and
that.
we have a lot of our own constituents that ask us about this because they have concerns too. So this is a way for the aldermen to educate themselves, inform themselves, so that we can inform our residents as well as be able to have the discussion with the members of the Board of VNA. But they are the top 3 ranking city officials in the city, and that is their job, as well as we have a job as legislators to do the things that we govern and legislate here. But that's not everything, okay? Unless one of us decide to run for one of those offices, which sometimes we do, that is not a place where we are, okay? So we're holding this hearing so that you can express that, and I'm sure some of us will, if not already have. I've sat down several times with the water department, the mayor's office. I have not been able to speak with the Lewis Reed's office or Comptroller Darlene Green's office, but they were here to testify. So this is just really trying to hear from everybody and just to get the public's point of view. So not only are everyone in this room hearing you, but you also will be on STL TV. You also be on YouTube, which I think has gotten the point across, whether you're for or against. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sandra Tamari.
Hi, good evening. I am also a Quaker connected to the earlier gentleman, worship here in the city and spend a lot of time here. I want to talk about my personal history as a Palestinian American. I probably wouldn't be living in St. Louis if it hadn't been for what Israel has been doing to my family, my people. My dad is a refugee from there. That's how we came to the U.S. I'm very grateful for having a passport because most Palestinians do not. I did try to visit my father's family last summer. The only way to get into Palestine is through Israel, so I flew into Tel Aviv. I don't know what you think about me, but I don't think of myself as a threatening person. I don't think of myself as someone who frightens people. But the Israelis looked at me and looked at my passport and immediately took me into interrogation. I stayed there for 8 hours. I was then declared a security threat after not giving a password for my personal email account, put into jail overnight in a very, very cruddy jail cell. and then sent back on the next plane to the US without my family knowing where I was. So I'm just explaining to you that there is apartheid in Palestine and Israel because a Jewish American can get on a plane and land in Tel Aviv and be granted Israeli citizenship because they asked for it. They may have no familial ties to that area, they may have never seen it or been there, but they are given priority. So because of my race, because of my ethnicity, I am discriminated against in Israel. I tell you this story because I want you to understand the apartheid regime that we're talking about, these laws. Veolia is deeply, deeply entrenched in perpetuating these laws. The ways they do that are by allowing Israel to maintain settlements in the West Bank. My father is from the West Bank, from just north of Jerusalem, from a city named Ramallah. Settlements that are built by Israel, supported by Israel, and protected by Israel for Jews only are built on Palestinian land. They're illegal under international law, and they're against U.S. foreign policy as well. Veolia provides services to these settlements, bus lines, water services, municipal services like trash collection, and they make it attractive for settlers to go there. Who wants to live in a place where you can't get a bus to? Who wants to live in a place where there's no running water? Who wants to live in a place where there's no trash collection? So Veolia is making it possible for Israel to maintain illegal settlements and to continue to violate international law. Veolia is involved in building the Jerusalem light rail. The Jerusalem light rail will connect Jerusalem to these settlements and will make the settlements permanent. Now you hear about the peace negotiations that are going on. They always talk about 2 states for 2 people. So how is this possible when you continue to build up infrastructure, you continue to confiscate Palestinian land? Veolia, with their light rail system, is confiscating Palestinian land. Not only are they supporting settlements, but they are a settlement. The light rail system is on confiscated land. So this is what we're talking about. This is an issue that impacts not only me, but many Palestinians in this city. Veolia also operates segregated buses in Palestine, in the West Bank. How do they do this? Well, there are roads that are built for the settlements.
1 minute.
And they only operate for the settlements. Palestinians are not allowed on these roads. So the buses, in effect, become segregated. The roads are also segregated because there are 2 license plates. If you're a Palestinian, you're given a white license plate. If you're Israeli, you get a yellow license plate. If you don't have the right license plate, you're not allowed on these settlement roads. What I'd like to say in closing is that as we think now about Nelson Mandela, who paid a great price to fight for justice, he said, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." I want you to think deep and hard that at one point Mandela was seen as a terrorist. He was seen as violent and was seen as someone that the U.S. wanted nothing to do with. Many years later, we've changed our thinking. I want St. Louis to be on the right side of history. So I urge St. Louis to dump Veolia.
Thank you, Sandra. Greg Meyer. Is Greg Meyer here?
Yes, ma'am. May I speak from here?
No, you have to approach.
I'm a resident of the city of St. Louis, have been for 58 of my 61 years. Very simply, I don't want my tax money going to this organization. I'm not speaking for any of their activities, just I think our city can deal with this situation on its own, and I don't think we need to spend any money on a consultant contract. Thank you.
And Mr. Meyer, which ward do you live? Excuse me, please. We do have rules.
Yes,
and I
ma'am.
understand everybody's happy, but we please need to hold our applause, okay? What ward are you from?
23rd.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Used to live in yours.
I still do.
There you go.
Thank you. Jonathan I'm sorry. Yeah, Jonathan Carpenter?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jonathan Carpenter. I am a Veolia Water employee. Bring a kind of different perspective than a Veolia Water employee. As I was thinking through, I've been with Veolia a little over a year, but I actually was a customer of Veolia Water. I was the Minority Business and Women Business Enterprise Director for the City of Indianapolis when Veolia held that contract. One thing that I would like to bring out is that there are millions of dollars that went to minority and women-owned businesses when Veolia held that contract. We had never had a contractor in the City of Indianapolis that brought that much economic viability to that city as Veolia did. As being the one that monitored that contract for its participation levels for minority and women-owned businesses, I saw their levels go beyond the participation percentages that we had required of them. Not because we wanted them to go beyond the percentages, because it was the culture of that company. I had never monitored a contract that big in the City of Indianapolis where millions and millions of dollars above and beyond what we requested as a city went to minority and women-owned businesses. That's what happened when Veolia held the contract with the City of Indianapolis. I sat on their Minority and Women Business Committee where we looked for and identified potential companies to become bigger and better. I saw former employees start their companies out of the water company, go out on their own and become successful companies through the results of working with Veolia Water. Now, I'm proud to say that over the last couple of months, Veolia has been one of the only water companies to actually establish a national minority supplier to person, a position directed just at minority women-owned businesses throughout the country in North America. So in all of our projects, we now have a national supplier diversity director directing our efforts at minority and women-owned businesses. I'm very proud to say that. 2 months ago, in the city of Milwaukee, the mayor recognized Veolia Water and caught us by surprise and declared a Veolia Day in the city of Milwaukee only because of one thing, because of their efforts to increase and work with minority and small businesses. That he was so impressed and was so happy with the contract in Milwaukee that he declared a certain day, Veolia Day in the city of Milwaukee. So that's the perspective, that's the thing that I would like for this committee to know, especially in the demographics of this city and what's important and the things that I read and that I know, is that you should know about a company that's had incredible sustainability in helping the economic viability for minority and women-owned businesses in their contracts.
Okay, Alderman Boyd.
Yeah. Thank you. Certainly minority participation is something that's near and dear to me. So can you tell me what percentage of the participation levels were there and how did that translate to dollars?
Well, at the time, we let's say we had a contract with 20% requirement or 15, Veolia would come in with 30% or 35%. It was incredible. Specifically dollars, without looking at the numbers, and then again, this was 5 years ago, they'd give like $30 million would go to minority and women-owned business. It was incredible. And not only that, I'd go so far as to say their support of organizations like the largest African-American festival in the country, if you've ever heard of the Indianapolis Black Expo, Veolia was always a major sponsor of that organization so that it became one of the biggest festivals in the country.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Jeanette Desnoer.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And it's Denoyer, Janet Denoyer. I am a citizen of St. Louis and a member, a resident of the 23rd Ward. I appreciate the opportunity to come this evening. I am very concerned about using a consultant to provide input to how our water department should be run. Obviously, providing water to our citizens is a very important public service. And one of the things I'm very concerned about is proper oversight of the contract, both in terms of the quality of the water, the dependability of the service, the customer service that's provided, the treatment of the employees of the water department, i.e. the labor, and whether or not we have proper recourse if we feel that the contract is not giving us what we would like to see. So as a concerned citizen, I wanted to bring that forward, and I thank you for that opportunity.
And Jeanette, if I may say, the reason why the water department is considering a consultant, whether it's Veolia or anyone, is to try to make sure they're running the department efficiently enough. Right now, we really only sell 40% of what we produce, and there are a lot of things out there we can do to tighten things up. It's just like you being in your house and you know where everything is, but someone else comes in and say, hey, did you ever try that? And you never thought of it. This is the reason why they feel that they need someone from the outside to look in, rather who is Veolia or not. I'll reiterate that. But what we were faced with before I became public chairwoman of public utilities was a rate hike. And because there was one rate hike that Alderman Villa did, there were two other proposals coming down the line. So it kind of scared the bejesus out of me not to want to become the public chairperson, because no one wants to be reigning over something that's going to cost taxpayers more dollars. So I think this is why the water department is considering a consultant company, whether that's, again, Veolia or not. So just so you understand, we're not consulting out, or the city is not, or the water department is not consulting out the water department. This is a 4-month contract that will just give ideas and ways of running more efficient. Now, the second phase has not been negotiated. That would be something later on in the contract. I do not know when this will even become back up in front of the Board of E&A, but I just wanted to clarify to you that even if it wasn't Veolia today, they still would be considering that, okay?
And I appreciate your comments.
All right.
I just want to make sure that as we're looking at what they're proposing, that we are taking some of those points into consideration that I just mentioned.
Point well
Okay.
taken. Thank you. James McKee. Oh. Okay, there's no James McKee. We'll move on. Chuck Norman. Hello, Mr. Norman.
Thank you, Chairman Flowers, members of the board. My name is Jack Norman. I am a resident of Greater St. Louis. I do not at present live or work in the city itself, but in the past I have done both. I live in Columbia, Illinois, about 13 miles south of the Arch, the construction of which I had a tiny part of. My wife and I are often in the city. We are members of the zoo, the art museum, the historical museum, and the symphony. We shop. I participate every Sunday evening in the Central West End Peace Vigil. We have been fans of the Browns and of the Hawks. The effects of proximity to the city are broad and important. Columbia in the past has consulted with the city water people about the possibility of St. Louis providing a backup supply of water to the city of Columbia. I have made good use of St. Louis transportation facilities to get to Columbia, to Granite City, to Collinsville, to Jeff City and Kansas City, to Chicago, to Battle Creek, on the occasion of my induction into the Army, which happened in St. Louis, and Fort Bragg, to San Francisco, to Albuquerque, to Seattle. I have experience with municipal utility policy as a Plan Commission member and with developers' teams of consultants. I'm a former member of the Board of Directors of the Coalition for the Environment. There are three crucial matters for all of us as citizens wherever we live, namely water, food, and energy. None of those three can do well without the other two doing well. So water, the subject of this meeting, is crucial in supplying food and in supplying the energy that we desire in this country. In managing all three of those, or any of those, for the public benefit, openness and transparency are obviously required. We must be open to suggestions, but skeptical about what people tell us. It's hard to be sure of what the motives are of people who are speaking to us. Veolia's reputation includes broad experience in municipal utilities, which is a plus. It also includes insufficient care and mismanagement, so caution is appropriate. Thank you.
And you are on the con side, correct?
Excuse me?
You are on the con, you're speaking on the con side. You're speaking on the con side against Veolia.
Yes, but I'm open to being persuaded as better information comes in.
Okay, and Jack, I said Juck because I didn't see the A, it looks like a U, so thank you. I'm sorry for that. Thank you very much. Is Jeanette Oxford here? Hello, Jeanette.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to come before you. Took me a little while to get here. I have a brand new hip just installed on June 11th, so I had gotten a little stiff as I was waiting for my turn.
No problem.
I am a member of the Sierra Club and receive also the newsletter for the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, groups that I have come to trust for information over the last 15 years. I know that they do careful research, and so I was very concerned when I started to read about Veolia and their record. Many of you know that I have a history of public service, and that a lot of that focus has been on affordable basic human needs. There's nothing more basic to any of us than having affordable, clean, safe water. And when I read about a company that has a history of overcharging, that has lawsuits connected to it around things like misleading investors, fines for discharging raw sewage, and unreliable reporting at a hazardous waste incinerator nearby in Illinois, it does make me wonder if we have any business being connected to them with a contract. In talking to a member of the committee a little earlier tonight, I learned that the other folks who submitted proposals also have some problems in their histories. Well, perhaps we need to demand more in how we write the RFP or something, because I don't see why we would want to place ourselves in alliances with folks who do have such troubled histories. Surely there's someone we can consult with who has an ethical record that can be a company that we can trust for reliable advice and not have so much that we have to hold our noses about, whether it's how our water might smell in the future or about their own records. So I do urge the city to proceed cautiously, and I thank you for making it possible for us to have a period of public comment about this, and I hope that the Board of E&A is also taking into consideration what the folks in the audience have to say tonight. Thank you for your time.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. I will say that we do have some members. There is Tom Shepard here from the President Reed's office is here. Mary Ellen Ponder from the Mayor's office is here. I'm not sure if we have a representative from the Comptroller's office, but they all have been invited to speak and to listen in, so I'm sure that they are. Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, in light of that, can we ask if there's someone from the Comptroller's office here?
Is there someone, a representative from the Comptroller's office here? No, there's not.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back on the pro side. Julie Hauser? Sorry, Julie.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to actually speak tonight. My name is Julie Hauser. I am president of a company called the Hauser Group. It's a public relations firm based here in St. Louis, and I'm actually a proud member of the Veolia team that is here with this proposal for the city. And while I was going to talk a little bit about my firm and our role, I'm actually going to request if I can allot my time back to Scott so that he can address some of the additional statements that have been made since I left. Is that possible?
If you want to yield your time, you may.
I would like to. Thank you very much.
I mean, Dan did the same thing for Ms. Logan. So it's the same deal. Okay, go.
Couple of issues that I just heard in the past, half hour. Veolia and its financial stability. We have $36.5 billion in revenue. We have $6.5 billion in cash, and we have a credit rating of BBB+. So that pretty much addresses any issues related to financial stability. I wanted to touch on Israel, and again, I know there's a lot of passion in the room, but our services are helping both Israelis and Palestinians. They're helping Muslims, Christians, Jews. Our employees are Muslims, Christians, and Jews, Israelis, Israeli Arabs, and Palestinians. The Jerusalem Light Rail is up and running. Half of the drivers that are employed there, and that rail serves predominantly Palestinian and predominantly Israeli neighborhoods. Half of the drivers are either Israeli Arabs or Palestinians. Our mission really is to provide environmental services to people who need them, and that is our focus in Israel. With respect to running a segregated bus line, we serve one community that is in Israel proper, that is an Orthodox Jewish community that makes a voluntary choice by their religious beliefs to segregate where men sit with men and women sit with women on that bus line, and that is the so-called apartheid. We run 130 bus lines in Israel, and 3 of those seem to be in dispute. But I will point out that no court, no country, no international tribunal has found Veolia in violation of any international law.
Let me ask you this. What is the reason for running the bus lines? Is that for your employees?
No, that is to provide transportation
to
for
the public?
people. Yes, for the public.
Okay.
And in fact, that enables Palestinians to get to their jobs to improve the quality of lives for their families. There was a survey recently conducted on ridership in the Jerusalem Light Rail, and 75% of the Palestinian passengers support that rail. And this is conducted by a third party. 85% say they were satisfied or very satisfied with that service, and that is a very high number for public transportation. We understand the passion. We're not here to debate Israel or the services we provide. We're here really to address the needs of St. Louis, and we believe we can help. I also feel obliged to address Whitesburg, Kentucky. There was reference to that, I think, in one of the opening speakers. And there was reference to petroleum in the water supply, and that indeed did happen. But our employees acted very quickly to protect the public water supply, and there was references to treating petroleum products with carbon systems. Carbon does not treat, it is not designed to remove petroleum from the water supply. What happened 3 times was an oil company had caused a spill into the river, several times had placed drums underground next to a river, and those drums leaked and
You have 1 minute.
and polluted the water supply, and our employees had intervened and not only addressed the issue, but identified the source of the leak. So in Whitesburg, Kentucky, we're proud of the actions of our employees. There was reference to SAGE, and SAGE being the hazardous waste facility across the river. And the reality is that our society produces hazardous and non-hazardous materials, and someone needs to deal with that, and we do that very responsibly. There is, that facility is in full compliance with its RECRA and Title V permits. It's been in full compliance with chemical emissions, and there has been one incident, and contrary to what I've read, where I've read the facility was fined $3 million, another local writer wants you to believe that the facility was fined, quote, millions for releasing toxic chemicals into the air.
Okay,
contrary to that,
Go ahead and finish your sentence.
8 years ago, there was a consent decree with the Illinois EPA, and there was a fine. There was a penalty of $25,000, not $3 million. That event occurred 8 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I
I'm sorry.
inquire?
I'm sorry. Could you come back up? Because Alderwoman Gracia says she had a question as well, and you do too. Scott, could you please come back up? Alderwoman Gracia, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a quick question. Could you have all the people who are on the Veolia payroll raise their hand? I'm just curious, and I know we haven't gone through the entire list yet.
Sure.
If there's anybody speaking on Veolia's behalf who's not being paid by Veolia.
Well, should we first identify Veolia employees? So first, Veolia employees.
Or contractors.
Secondly, contractors. And then, does that answer the question?
Well, anyone here to speak on Veolia's behalf that's not being paid or directly connected with them?
Is there any citizen support?
Okay, thanks.
Alderman.
Yeah.
Scott.
Scott, I apologize. I didn't catch your last name.
Yes, Edwards.
Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few questions here. Can you tell me again what the credit rating for Veolia is?
Triple B plus.
Okay. And which credit rating agency is that?
It's one of the majors. I can get that answer very promptly.
Do you realize that the city has a better credit rating than Veolia does? So.
Okay.
Sorry.
If we go back, excuse me,
please.
if we do
So-
one more applause, we're going to let another Veolia person speak, okay?
So, I guess it's ironic that we're turning to an agency that has a worse credit rating to get financial advice and expertise. And along those lines, were there financial disclosures, to your knowledge, required as part of the RFP? Because I'm going through the responses from the RFP, and I don't see any information about credit ratings or financial disclosures or financial standing of organizations.
I'm not aware of any. But as a public company, all of that is online and available. And we're happy to address any issues there, provide any financial data. I was just trying to address the notion that the company is not financially stable, and indeed it is.
Well, I get a lot of emails on a very regular basis from citizens of the city that continually tell me that the city is going bankrupt, and we have a A+ credit rating, and you all have a triple B+ credit rating.
I'm not an expert in finance, so I can't address the difference.
I understand, neither am I, but I don't think that that's jiving all that well with me. I understand that you're a publicly traded company, and therefore financials are available on your website, no doubt, but I find it ironic that the city wouldn't have that as part of their evaluative practice with an RFP as well when you're talking about contracts of this size. And also, and lastly, I can't remember if it was yourself or David Gaddis who had mentioned a letter of reference from the city of Indiana, but I don't see that either in your response in the RFP. And so where is that?
Well, I think David, you might want to answer, but I think David was offering to provide that letter or suggesting that you seek that directly.
Okay.
Independently.
I thought I heard that it had been provided, and I'm not seeing it anywhere.
Yeah, we have a request for a copy of their gender policy. Is that what you asked for?
Non-discrimination policy.
Non-discrimination policy, and of the letter of reference from Indianapolis.
Okay, thank you,
Okay,
Madam
thank you.
Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Patrazi? Not here. Ivan Martin. Ivan Martin.
Good evening.
Evening.
So you've already announced me. My name is Ivan Martin, in the flesh. I live in the 6th Ward. I'm a proud resident of St. Louis. And I'm also a member of the Justice Not War Peace Vigil folks that stand on the corner every Sunday night at Grand and Lindell. Just to remind everyone that we should practice more ways to make peace happen in our world, but that's not what I'm here tonight to talk about directly. Here to talk about the good water, and first I want to take a drink. Because yes, I agree with you. I really do enjoy our good water. But mostly, I appreciate the people who brought us this good water. And I'm going to kind of get back to that. I'm going to take a little roundabout trip on how we're treating those people and how we get mindsets. I'm sure in this room there are many people who say they support the troops. And I believe a lot of us do. Might not always support their mission, but we do support the people. They're human beings just like us. So when we talk about consultants and contractors, I had the pleasure of speaking to one of our U.S. senators, Claire McCaskill, one day about an issue, and I asked her point blank, why do Blackwater employees, who are now Z, and we know their track record, why do you hire them to protect you when you say you support the troops, and we don't use our best troops to support you? She said, well, that's a State Department decision. Well, the people in this room are turning the decision over to the A&E or E&A committee to make a decision for our water. And I'm just saying, when you get a mindset that says only consultants can fix our problem, I take a little, I guess I get a little upset about that. Because, see, my job went out the door when they hired consultants, too. I used to work for one of the biggest communication companies in the world. And my job now is down in Brazil, meaning your phone records are monitored out of Brazil. They're having riots down there now. And I'm just saying, when you contract with these multinational companies and you take control out of the people's hands just to save some money, and I know we got to look at ways to save money, but I'd like to look at ways and encourage the committee to have some consultation with those that have to make these decisions and say, how are we going to reward the people who got us this good water? Things change. Maybe we could set up committees and have a real community effort. We got scientists at Washington University and at St. Louis University. But when you get a mindset that only corporations and those big guys can fix your problem, that doesn't always get you results. But I'd like to say one more thing before I close down here. I like seeing this democracy happen because this is what democracy looks like. I only wish that the mayor and Mr. Reed was here and Darlene Green was here to hear this, because I think it's real important to hear this firsthand. And that we could caution them, and you can see the opposition in this room. And if you want a community buy-in to this product, to what we're trying to do to improve our water, I certainly would encourage you to dump Veolia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanne Williams? Is Joanne Williams?
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Members of the committee, my name is Joanne Williams. I am a business representative for the Carpenters District Council. Previously to being a BA for the last 20 years with the Carpenters, I was the financial secretary with ASME, the American Federation of State and County Municipal Employees, and prior to that I was a water department employee. I am a citizen of the city of St. Louis, lifelong a resident of the 21st Ward. And over the years, I've watched and had friends and have known many of the administrators, employees at the water department. Currently, I represent the water treatment plant operators, those people who treat the water that you drink. Prior to that, I represented the customer service reps, the water systems foremen, the maintenance workers, utility workers, the meter repair workers, and most of the general workers in the water department. Historically, we've always had some of the best water in the country. Wherever I go, whenever I travel, I'm always happy to get back to St. Louis because it's always had the best tasting water for me. And historically, water employees have always been very hardworking and very courageous in trying to do a job that most people don't worry about until something goes wrong with it. I've heard a lot of the discussion of the concerns here, and mine is the workers. And it's also the fiscal condition of the city. Back in 2007, when we were in negotiations and the city was claiming that they were suffering financial and fiscal crisis, one of the things we asked about was, I brought up a suggestion that had been suggested probably in 1985 by a gentleman by the name of Robert Bornfeld. Robert Bornfeld was the meter and tap supervisor at the time, and his responsibility was to repair and sustain the meter department. At that time, Anheuser-Busch, which is the largest water user in the city, had proposed the purchasing of meters for the entire city of St. Louis, with the caveat that it offset the cost of their water usage. And the city would then have the opportunity to impose meters, and they would not have to pay for them, and they were going to purchase them from Rockwell International, which at that time was one of the major contributors of our meter supply system. And all the city had to do was reduce Anheuser-Busch's water cost over a period of time. And the city said no for political reasons, and so that didn't happen. 2007, we were in negotiations, and the city was saying they couldn't afford to give city employees a raise. I asked, had they looked at the water system again, because they were suggesting an increase in rates. And they said no. And most people don't know that the city of St. Louis are on a flat rate, the majority of residences are. And no resident over an inch-and-a-half line or a 6-compartment unit is metered. And counter to that in the county, most residents, in fact all, are metered. And I love to garden. I have some of the greenest lawns in the city of St. Louis. And I have really big tomatoes and pretty flowers. And I do that because I water constantly. And I don't mind paying a little bit more if we can contain the control of our water system to do that. I have butterflies and bees and everything else in my yard because I don't use a lot of pesticides. And I know the water that I'm feeding my grass with is pretty clear. And the city refused to entertain the proposal that we made as a union representing employees, that they look at what constitutes a home. You currently bill for trash pickup by residents. In a 2-family flat, you bill twice for both households because the reasoning is that those 2 households produce 2 households worth of trash. But you don't do the same thing for water usage. For a 2-family flat, that would increase revenue. That would be a cost savings. You're asking how to save money. I don't think you have to hire a consultant to do that. I think common sense can be implied. I mean, unfortunately, common sense does not seem to be that common. We will spend money to figure out how to save money from people whose job it is to make money. And nonprofit agencies, this is a for-profit company. We are a government. We don't make profit. Our job is not to make profit, it's produce sources and services for citizens. So at the bottom line, at the end of the day, Veolia has to make a profit. And I would go one step further, Alderman. Not only is their credit rating less than the city of St. Louis, it's less than the state of Missouri also. So if we can do it, why can't we look at who's running the water department and whether or not they're capable of doing a better job? Because if you're going to leave the same people there, and they don't know how to fix what's wrong, you wouldn't do that to the people I represent. When my people can't do a job well, they are dismissed.
Okay, Joanne, I don't want to cut you off, but I know you're getting closer to 5 minutes, and I just want to know if there are any aldermen that want to ask questions. Yes, Alderman Ogilvie.
Hi, Ms. Williams.
How you doing, Alderman?
I'm glad we're talking about meters because I think we talked a lot about it, but I have not heard really what the plan is for meters. Somebody waved in the background, maybe. I hope we get more. So I'm asking Ms. Williams because you represent some employees of the water division, and maybe you know through the grapevine. It seems to me we don't even meter every new household right now. So I don't know what we're metering. I assume we meter all commercial accounts, I imagine. Is that accurate?
If it's a commercial account or it is a resident that has a spa, a pool, or something that generates a lot of water, then you do. If it's an 1.5-inch line and it's a 4-family flat or a 6-family flat, you don't. So there's 6 households who are utilizing that water. The reason that we were given was that it would be too costly to do so. But our suggestion was to implement it incrementally, because if you got a phase 2 in your contract, you can have phase 1, 2, and 3 in implementation of a metered system. If you did that on new residents or even existing residents, then people would maybe use less water, but we also asked them to explore the selling of water, because we have sold water in the city of St. Louis, to St. Louis County, and other areas. So there are other ways of generating that, but the meter system could pay for itself eventually. And there's nobody who could say that some of the biggest users, which is Monsanto, Mallinckrodt, and AB, would not also, our partners in this, assist us in subsidizing this, because it is a resource that they use too. Now, while we have those 3 as the biggest major users, we also have Mallinckrodt and Monsanto, who are chemical producers, and we don't want there to be a situation, at least I don't, where we are looking at the possible contamination as a result of a laxing in our system. I think that metering is something similar to the trash pickup. Nobody expected the general amount of revenue generated by that to occur. And my only concern with that is that we didn't think about how we're going to use the recycling money that revenue came from that either. But the fact is that there's a lot that we can do to save money and to produce revenue that should be explored before anybody extends a contract. The other thing that concerns me is our members are telling us that members of Veolia are already in the water department and asking questions and doing and acting in certain capacities. So, you know, I commend you to having this hearing. I think that the opportunity for people to have information makes everybody make better decisions and also think things out down the road instead of acting, well, we want to do this because we have a problem. Well, this problem didn't start yesterday. And I submit to you there's a lot of former employees of the water department who were in charge that didn't have to have rates increase under their supervision that I would consult with before I hired somebody with a questionable background to consult with them. I think that they ran the department. I think they did a very good job at doing that. And I think as citizens, they'd be more than happy to try to contribute to a resolution.
Yeah.
Hey, Alderman Oakley, do you have any more questions?
Just very briefly, this is not really a question, but at some level, the metering, the math, I think this came from the last meeting, is actually really complicated. It's not as straightforward as a trash fee, because if we start metering residential accounts, they may use less water, and then we don't have an issue with not having enough water. We have an issue with having potentially not enough revenue. So if we're selling them water by the gallon now instead of a flat rate, and they reduce their usage by 1/3, we may decrease our revenue while simultaneously having to have somebody go read the meter or something once a year. So it is. I mean, I do think we should do it because it's a good environmental practice, and we should do it with new construction for sure. But I do wonder if just going back retroactively and metering all existing houses is going to actually give us the result we think it might give us.
I don't know that that is not a possible outcome. However, you may have people use water more responsibly. MSD currently bases their rates of utilization on our water usage. And people have to use water, and people may have to modify how they use it, but I agree. I think you should approach it from, and I don't think it's one thing, also, Alderman. I think that you have to approach it from at least considering that as a possibility. If you're talking about a savings of $315,000 as being relevant, if that generates $315,000, that pays for the $250,000 of the contract you're considering to enter.
Okay, Alderman Cone.
I just, I applaud you for talking about meters, and I'm curious if you have one on your property.
I don't.
Okay. I hope you're using rainwater barrels. That would be awesome for your garden with the beautiful
Yes,
big
I am.
tomatoes. But I guess my other point to make here while we're talking about this discussion is, a large portion of the city is also, investor-owned property. So we've got a lot of rental properties that are in the city as well. I have a large number in my ward in particular, and over the last few weeks and months that we've been having this discussion, one of the examples that I have provided for folks is I have a house on my block just 5 doors down, approximately, that is rental property, and they use an inflatable pool that takes up their entire backyard, and they fill it up every year, probably 5 times a year, because it never ceases to flow into the alleyway when they're draining it out. And that's an incredible amount of water that we're just wasting on a continual basis just for that one household alone, and I can guarantee it's not metered. So, I understand the challenges with metered water, but I think that we do need to, as a society, use our water more efficiently and think a little bit more about that usage as well.
And Madam Chair, if I could just close. We represent the people who provide services, and services come with a cost. We tend to have been spoiled by the fact that we have not had a lot of fees implemented on a lot of things citizens in every other community pay for every day on a routine basis. And so it's kind of difficult sometimes to adjust to that. And I understand that, but we're talking about people being employed also, and people continuing having good jobs and being able to take care of their families and sustain those neighborhoods and continue to pay for their water bill, which continues to keep the water bill, the water company in service. So this is a revolving issue. I think that I would suggest that if you remember you talked about contracting out. We don't have a health department, hospitals anymore. Citizens didn't vote on that. And we don't have, we've modified how we interact with governments in the county and how we provide for health services, and those things change. Don't think that because citizens have to vote to sell the water department, there aren't other ways of taking it over. This is an enterprise account. Nobody's talked about what status this would be if this occurs, because currently, right now, the airport and the water department are the only 2 enterprise accounts in the city of St. Louis that generate revenue that go back into financing those institutions. And if you do enter a consulting contract, what status does that put the water department in, and how does those revenues become used? Because somebody has to make a profit somewhere, and I submit to you that when it doesn't make sense on one side that they're doing this just for a consulting contract of $250,000, there has to be a freeing of money on somewhere.
Actually, she had run out of time, so I was
I'm being very generous with her time, but we do have a couple more questions, and we're going to be in here soon. But I do know that you represent our water department employees, and I know you're down here every Friday. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to be able to speak a little longer, but we do still have 2 other questions. And I know there are some people on here that would like to speak that have not spoke. So Alderwoman Agracia, I know it's seniority, but she leaned up a little bit, so go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for being here. Do you know who James Comer is, the fiscal manager at the Water Division? This committee received a memo from him this week discussing the fact that in 2010, the Water Division had 0 monetary reserves. And 3 years later, I guess through the own industriousness of the Water Division employees, they've built up a 90-day cash reserve of $12 million and $11 million in cash, which was transferred into capital improvement ordinances. And I'm just wondering if you think this level of productivity or this momentum can continue within the water department itself, or if you think we need to have maybe not Veolia, but another contractor take a look at additional savings measures.
I don't necessarily think you need to look at any outside agencies. I think you need to look within. I've represented a lot of employees over the years, and one of the things I found to be consistent is that the people who do the job know why things work and know why they don't. And generally, by the time you pay a consultant to come in and ask them what they do every day for them to figure out what they're doing wrong so they can tell them what to do right, you have wasted and exhausted a lot of income when you can go directly to the source. Jim Comer has been at the Water Department for some years, many years, and he's a very respected official there. He is a finance guy. He's not a political animal, and I believe that if he says that he agrees, but I also understand, if I'm not misspeaking, that he's one of the few who voted not to enter into the Veolia contract.
That's correct. Thank you.
Alderwoman Howard.
I guess what my confusion is
Does the water department have the capacity to do this assessment with the staff they currently have? Or would it be wise, my thought is, as you said, we have many resources here available to us. If it took an outside voice, why wouldn't we go to some of the resources that are homegrown resources, if that's what it takes, and scale down? To me, bringing another large company in adds another layer of bureaucracy and another layer of who's in charge, who's driving the car, and who's really telling the truth about what needs to happen.
Well,
I
agree with you. I as a former water employee years ago, I entered they had a suggestion program, and I made a suggestion to say what I anticipated to be $150,000 to $200,000 for the meter department, and it was rejected. And I kept submitting it because I was stubborn. And finally, they just gave me a gift certificate to Pasta House and told me to go away. And what they said was that this was a contract of a political contributor to then Mayor Shamel. Now, and that's politics. That's the nature of why contracts are let, and sometimes why people are given access to consulting positions when there may not appear to be any reason to bring them in.
I understand that. But I guess my question is, do you think we currently have the staff on board?
Yes, I do.
That we could do this?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Boyd?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Boyd?
Ms. Williamson, I'm not for the contract necessarily. I'm listening to all the conversation, but I want to ask you this. I'm just reminded of oftentimes how I may be closed-minded. You ever had a friend who you kept giving free advice to maybe save money or to do something different that would enhance their quality of life, but this person never listened to you? Then all of a sudden, somebody else told this person the exact same thing that you had been saying, and all of a sudden there was an epiphany.
I had a husband to do that.
I didn't want to go there. I started to say that about myself, but and my point to that is sometimes it takes someone from the outside to have conversation, to say the exact same thing that you would say before we realized.
To be quite frank with you, Alderman, I find the analogy a little disingenuous, and this is why. The difference in giving an advice to a friend or a loved one is that they can choose to take it or not take it. Employees are a little bit different. If employees' jobs are on the line and they have their jobs at stake and their job is to make a profit and run an department efficiently, it's not a choice. It's a responsibility. And if they don't do that, then you have a recourse other than just shaking your head on that they ignored you. You have the right and the responsibility to replace them with capable people, not to contract out with other people to tell you why people who you've hired to do a job don't do it well.
Well, I'm not going to debate you with that, because certainly I can, but I want to be very respectful, because sometimes we just can agree to disagree on process. But I think there are times where it can work and maybe not work.
We agree to disagree.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Oh, Madam Chair, I have...
Okay, you just allowed another Veolia person to speak. I did warn you. Go ahead.
I was going to inquire of Ms. Williams. Joanne, do you mind coming back real quick? I just had one quick question. I'm glad that you brought up the hospitals, by the way, even though it wasn't asked of you at that point, but I was going to ask that question. I guess the only other thing that I have, and being that you're in the position that you're with organized labor, are you familiar with Veolia's record on organized labor issues?
Yes, what I've been able to find out is not the best in terms of unions. I understand that similar to sort of what we faced when we were dealing with the Sodexo contract in the public school system, where a lot of your labor was concerned about it and you end up replacing them because Aramark came behind that when they didn't do a good job. I think that sometimes you get enough warning shots where if there's enough disturbing information about a company, that you should err on the side of caution.
Is there anything specific that you're able to share?
Just that they're not labor friendly, that there's not a lot of welcoming to the unions, that they don't negotiate in good faith, that sort of thing. No specifics in any specific plant. I would not say that I had any specific, but everything I've been able to find out is labor has been pretty not high on their list.
As someone who's a representative for the Water Division employees, would you be able to try and find out any
I will do my
specific
best, yes, sir.
information and provide it to the committee? That would be much appreciated.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Boltizer.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairman, Chair, and the rest of the members of the Board of Aldermen for this opportunity. My name is Anna Baltzer. I'm married into a St. Louis family of 4 generations, and I proudly own a home in Dutchtown. I prepared some remarks, but before I get into them, I wanted to address a few things that I've heard so far. In particular, we've heard sort of over and over again dismissiveness over the assertions that our Dump Veolia Coalition has brought forward, and I want to tell you that we take very seriously our facts. For example, even behind all of the different signs is a description of every single city, which perhaps, Madam Chair, we could bring to you the descriptions. Basically, you know, we're hearing things like, this isn't true, this hurts our feelings, whatever it might be, and I just hope that we can get substance behind these assertions that these things aren't true, because what I'm hearing are also falsities. For example, the Veolia representative mentioning over and over again, both on Wednesday and today, that the references had all called back, where actually in 3 out of the 5 references, according to our sources, did not call back, including Indianapolis, where we actually tried 3 different numbers for Indianapolis. None returned the calls. Another example is some of the assertions that were made recently by one of the Veolia reps about what's happening in Israel-Palestine, saying things like, for example, what they're doing helps Palestinians, and I just want to caution us against speaking for Palestinians. Palestinians in this room, Palestinians in our community, Palestinians in Palestine have reached out and talked about their oppression, and to say that they are being helped by this company is exactly the same argument that was used during apartheid in South Africa, to say that black South Africans were being helped. Let's let the people speak for themselves and ask them what they think. For example, referring to this survey, I don't know which survey Mr. Edwards is referring to, but it could be the survey where Veolia asked people how they would feel about riding in a train with an Arab, if they felt okay with that, if they liked that idea or not. Racist things like this have been called out consistently for Veolia. Where is the methodology? Who are they surveying? Over and over again, there are so many things here, and I just hope that we can get substance behind the assertions, especially as it seems that Veolia will get sort of a final word. I'll get to what I can of what I was hoping to say. At the first Veolia hearing last Wednesday, I was proud of my alderman, Shane Cohen, when he insisted that any city contract should have a comprehensive non-discrimination clause for hiring. St. Louis has adopted important standards like that in the long road to challenging and overcoming bigotry and racism in our city. And then I wondered, what if the question at hand were not about discriminatory hiring, but discriminatory services? What if Veolia only worked with straight people, but refused to serve queer communities? What if the company served white people, but refused service to people of color? Would that affect our decision about whether or not to work with them? What if the people of color were not in St. Louis, but in Montgomery, Alabama? What if they were a little further? What if they were in South Africa or in the Middle East? This is precisely the question at hand for us now, because these types of blatantly discriminatory policies are precisely what Veolia knowingly practices towards Palestinians right now. I have witnessed with my own eyes, experienced myself the reality that as a Jew, I am able to ride Veolia buses freely while my Palestinian friends are not allowed on, simply because of their skin color and their ethnic and religious background. And this is not a question of sitting on the back of the bus. Palestinians cannot even set foot on these buses. And this is only one of multiple racist practices which Veolia is complicit in as part of the Israeli occupation. Many Palestinians who have been discriminated against by Veolia live here in St. Louis. Many own businesses in the city. They are your constituents. You represent them. Please do not turn your backs on them and say that the discrimination that they and their families struggle against every day is not relevant. Madam Chair, St. Louis is not responsible for solving injustices occurring in the Middle East. That would be unreasonable and impossible. But we are responsible for the choices that we make, what we choose to be involved in, who we choose to work with, what we choose to contribute to. There are a million excellent reasons to dump Veolia, and you can pick your favorite. But please don't fall prey to the argument that what this company does to human beings does not matter simply if some of them are outside of the city. We are better than that. Please stand up for your constituents, stand up for justice, stand up for our city, and dump Veolia.
Thank you, Anna.
And I'm happy to answer questions on the Jerusalem Light Rail and all the things that had been mentioned before, as well as the JCRC, what they had been saying.
Okay. Are there any questions?
I have one. Would you mind explaining a little bit about apartheid? Because one of the Veolia folks mentioned that, about the gender separation on buses, which also can parlay back to religious law in some countries. But can you specifically address apartheid just so that there's clarification on that as well?
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of confusing. Veolia is actually involved in various different things. So one of the things is gender segregated buses. We were referring to buses that are run on Jewish settler-only roads in the West Bank. In the West Bank, as an example, to speak to your question, there are two different populations. There's Jewish settlers who have been moved in by Israel, and there's Palestinians who are predominantly Muslim or Christian. And they are excluded from living in settlements. They're excluded from using many of these different roads. There's a system of utter segregation that has been likened to apartheid by people like the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, by Nelson Mandela, as well as one of my colleagues spoke to before. Apartheid, the crime of apartheid under international law has three pillars. I hope I can remember them. One of them is a codified into law privileged identity, and we see that in practice. Another one is repressive policies towards those who resist the system, and the third one is physical separation and segregation. And in the West Bank, Palestinians are not allowed to live in the same towns. They're not subject to the same legal system. You can go to the same schools. There's a system of what has been called many times by apartheid and what fits the international definition of the crime of apartheid. And in the same way, that our city took a stand during apartheid in South Africa and said we're not going to work with certain companies involved there. We're drawing that parallel now in this case.
Okay, thank you. We have no more questions. Do you have a question?
Briefly. Thanks for coming today. I just, as I hear this passionate testimony, I'm reminded that I was once a person on the other side of our little wall here and waited a long time to say something. And I appreciate everybody who is here today. I really sincerely hope that many of you will come back in the future on something that this committee gets to officially weigh in on, or another committee, because I think the system needs this input, and in some ways it's sort of a tragedy that we have all this input now on an issue that is not actually within our control. So I just I wanted to get that out there before everybody leaves, that we really appreciate the input, and I think at this point probably wish we had a vote on it since we've heard heard all the information.
As you know.
So thank you, and thanks for everybody who
Can I respond super briefly?
Sure.
So I just want to say that even if you don't have a vote, your voice matters. I envy you. I envy you up here. I never get to give good news to my Palestinian friends who are told no and have bad news every day of their lives. And even simply you hearing and simply you expressing your support in whatever way is appropriate matters. And I envy you to have that power tonight. And then I also wanted to say in this process we've learned, the St. Louis Dump Veolia Coalition has learned a bit about the history in St. Louis of resolutions with regard to apartheid South Africa. And it turns turns out, according to my understanding, I'd like to learn more, maybe you guys know better, that the City of St. Louis actually passed resolutions about our what businesses we would and wouldn't do business with or would and wouldn't invest in. I think there were 2 of them, and we've been trying to get the specifics, and I'd love to get those details to you, but that is perhaps the kind of thing that would be better suited for you being able to have more of a voice than you have here, which I can understand is frustrating.
What were those issues?
Oh, I must have misspoke. In the case of apartheid South Africa.
Oh, apartheid,
Mhm,
okay. Well,
yeah.
we have a Jewish Italian person up here that may want to take that up. We'll see. Okay, thank you very much. I have someone on the pro side, and I cannot read their last name. John, it looks like SHLBD. Okay.
My name is John Stallard. I'm with Veolia. Been with them 25 years. Started out in a small project in Virginia. I've worked my way through numerous states. They've provided a good opportunity for me for a lot of people that I've been accompanied with. We've been long-term employees, 20 plus years. So I just wanted to come up and express that tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Does Veolia bring in their own employees?
No, in every municipality I'm in, we use the city's employees. We may bring in a project manager, but usually I'm with, basically I've worked 20-some years in conventional O&M, not
what?
Conventional O&M, to where we operate the utility with the employees become our employees. This is not that. This is simply a PPE.
At this point, it's not that, is
Correct.
what you're saying.
Well, as far as I know, that's nothing with this. It's a different branch that I
But
was
this
in.
contract, this current contract.
This current contract is simply
proposal.
Just a proposal. And don't confuse what I just said, that we're trying to do that. That's just the part I came from. I simply stepped into sales in the past
So
month or
you
so.
worked for a utility
Yes.
that was contracted Veolia.
Yes.
And Veolia hired you.
Correct.
Away from the utility, or you were hired
I was
because
hired
the
in as a
utility was
manager.
outsourced to that?
I was hired in as a manager with the utility.
Okay.
So a lot of the people that I've been with is 20 plus years employees. We've got contracts that's run that long.
Okay. So you left the company or the utility you were with and moved on to Veolia?
Yes, I was hired in on Veolia.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Michael Berg.
Good evening, Madam Chair and the rest of the committee. My name is Michael Berg. I'm a resident of the city of St. Louis in the 14th Ward, and I'm a Jew, and I oppose the human rights violation that the State of Israel perpetuates against Palestinian people as a part of a continuing occupation of Palestinian lands. And as you've already heard, Veolia has worked with the State of Israel and continues to work with the State of Israel to create and manage the infrastructure which makes these violations possible. Given this history of ethnic discrimination in St. Louis, especially looking at it's the 50th anniversary of the March on Selma, we do not need to support a company that helps facilitate ethnic discrimination in the Holy Land, operating segregated bus lines and trash dumps for segregated community. And furthermore, the St. Louis Water Division does not need Veolia. Last Wednesday, all members of the selection committee that chose to work with Veolia had an opportunity to justify their decision. They all had an opportunity to explain why they chose Veolia over Johnson Controls, Siemens, and Missouri American Water. The only one who gave any explanation at all was the Director of Public Utilities and Water Commissioner Kurt Scobie. He clearly stated his belief that the proposals of all the companies had merits and all would likely do a fine job. Then he cited Veolia's plan for communicating changes in the water division to the people of St. Louis as what convinced him that Veolia was the best choice. And as Alderman Ogilvie pointed out, under the Veolia proposal, Veolia would be outsourcing communication component to the Hauser Group. So it seems to be a weak point to recommend Veolia, considering that, as the alderman pointed out, that the city could hire an outside communications firm on their own without going through a Veolia. But the one member of the selection committee who has made a clear and strong statement justifying decision was Water Division Fiscal Manager James Comer, the lone vote against the contract with Veolia. He recently gave a statement to the Board of Aldermen, to this committee, and it was released in the Riverfront Times, and he explained how the Water Division has dealt with the fiscal crisis with the assistance of a consultant, Black & Veatch, to go from broke to presently having $12 million in cash reserves, all while outlining a workable plan to keep the division solvent for several years while still undertaking important capital improvements. He clearly doesn't believe that any outside agent is needed to be part of the operations of the Water Division. And let us be clear, Veolia is being considered to be hired not just as a consultant, but to be involved in operating the Water Division. Veolia representatives stated last Wednesday their firm does not generally own water divisions in the United States, they operate them. They stated that 100% of the time in this type of situation, Veolia proceeds from phase 1 to phase 2, from consultation to involvement in operations. Now, it's a bad idea to enact far-reaching changes when the water commissioner and the Water Division fiscal manager are not in agreement on the proper way to proceed. Not just Mr. Comer, but many other people within the Water Division also do not want this contract signed. Hundreds of St. Louisans, many, as you see before you, hundreds of St. Louisans have come out to vocally express their opposition to this contract between Veolia and the Water Division. I don't see anybody coming forward for it except for people who are would directly benefit from it. This proposal is divisive within the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. It's divisive within the Board of Aldermen. It's divisive within the Water Division. And it's divisive within the citizenry of the city. So given this reality and the lack of clarity over what Veolia offers over other options, why would we possibly still be considering hiring Veolia to be part of the operations of our Water Division?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Berg. There are no questions? Okay. My clerk is rocking every so slowly in front of me because I promised to end this hearing at 8:30. We are at 8:38 here. So there are people we have not heard from, and what I would like for you to do is take the opportunity to go online to www.stlouiscity.com. You can send each alderman your remarks, your statements, your opposition, and whatever you would like, as well as you can also send that information to each of the members of the Board of ENA. Because by applause, you give me no choice but let one Veolia person speak.
The people who signed up first have not gotten a chance to speak
Well,
yet.
once this hearing ends, if you want to continue to talk to me, you can. But I don't know how much tape there is on these cameras. And I know these aldermen, I promised them to go home to their families. So if after we conclude, if you'd like to stand here and talk with us, we can do that. I don't know, but I know the members are ready to go. Yes? Go ahead.
Just real quickly, I know everybody didn't get to speak that signed up, but we really do appreciate hearing from everyone here. So just don't think that you came down here and fell on deaf ears. I think we've learned a lot more tonight than we did last week. So I think it's been a very good night. You know, everyone raises a good issue, and the chairman said she would be around after the meeting, and I think if you want to speak to any of us, we'll all be around for a little bit. So,
Madam Chair.
I just want to let you know that.
And there are 19 people still yet to speak.
Okay.
And if you times that by 5, that's well over another hour. Who was asking me a question?
I was going to ask how many people are left to speak, and then is there a way to determine if any of those have something to speak on other than what's already been said at this juncture?
Are there any water department workers signed up to speak on this list? If you would please approach and state your name.
My name is Tom Rothermick. I'm a 42-year employee of the City of St. Louis, all in the Water Division. My present job title is Water Distribution Executive. I'm in charge of the distribution system and repair. I'd like to clarify a couple issues. The contract being sought is at the request of the Board of Aldermen after the last rate increase. The Board of Aldermen indicated at that time that no additional rate increase would be done until someone looked at our operations to see how effective we are. Issues about water consumption. You had indicated that only 40% of the water is accounted for. That's 40% of the water pumped to metered customers. There are some 75+ thousand flat rate customers within the City of St. Louis, which account for 35% of our water consumption, using water daily consumption estimates accepted by the water industry. Approximately 10 to 12% of all water is consumed by city agencies, particularly the Department of Park, Recreation, and Forestry, maintaining the water quality in the lakes and in swimming pools and other water-using devices. 10%, 12% is meter air and leakage in the distribution system. In the spring of 2011, another consultant was selected by a selection committee to do this same study. For whatever reason, the contract with that consultant was never signed. As someone had indicated earlier, you need to look at the documents from the present selection committee, and you will see that even though Cincinnati was contacted to make some kind of statement as their suitability, they never responded to the selection committee. Veolia has made several statements about how they had local water people to help manage or to help the water division do a better job. They've got 30 people and 2 utilities on the Illinois side. These are cities of populations of 15,000 and less. It is my opinion that it is questionable how much support they can provide for us. Under Section 3 of the, there have been tremendous improvements in the present proposed contract than what was initially submitted to the board and E&A in December. Under the latest program, normally when we write a contract, we said that there is 5% retainage until the final documents are submitted. There is no such clause in that section. In Section 16.4, if the contract is terminated, we pay Veolia the full amount that we say they're going to get paid, $250,000. I express anybody in this building who, if they hire a roof contractor and they are dissatisfied with that contractor's performance and cancel the contract, will pay that contractor for the entire amount that you agreed to. There are clauses in the document for arbitration. A fee should go to arbitration as well, not, gee, you get paid no matter what. And finally, in Section 16.1, there's a recommendation that says that if Phase 2, the contract is terminated, the recommended initiatives that have been selected for implementation by Veolia. I thought the Water Division was selecting what was to be implemented, not Veolia.
Are you looking at the initial contract or the one we discussed Wednesday?
The one you discussed Wednesday.
Okay.
That is on page 16, section 16.1. And that could be just a operator error, but that is significant. And that is all my comments at this time.
Well, I really do appreciate you coming forth. I mean, it's not all the times that we get city employees that are willing to speak on something that may not necessarily be in favor of the division, and I really do appreciate you coming up and being honest with your opinion.
Okay.
As a worker, we probably do have some questions from members here, so Vice Chairman Boyd.
It's just one question. You mentioned not receiving a reference from Cincinnati. Did you mean Indianapolis?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I meant Indianapolis, and that was the documentations prepared by the selection committee.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be clear.
Oh,
Thank you.
My statement.
Alderman Coon.
I don't have any questions for him in particular.
Okay. Since we're gonna, I'm gonna take a few more people.
I was hoping, could we get the good corporate citizens group that...
Excuse me, if you want to go to the side and ask her who she'd like to speak, then you can do that, but there's no yelling out. Geneva Botch. I'm sorry. Yeah, come on up.
I'm not the corporate accountability person.
You're on the list
Is
to
that
speak.
okay? All right. All right, so my name is Genevieve. I'm a resident of the 15th Ward in South St. Louis, and I'm also representing St. Louis Palestine Solidarity Committee this evening. This is a testimony from one of our other members, Suad. She couldn't be here tonight, so I'm reading this on her behalf. These are her words, and it'll be quick. It doesn't matter how far I trace my bloodline. I find that I am a Palestinian from both sides of the family. My father was evicted under gunfire from his hometown in 1948. I am the first generation in my family to have never been able to experience living or working in Palestine because I'm Palestinian. Israel considers people like me to be a demographic threat because of the fear that there will be too many Arabs. My real name, however, is Suad. I'm a filmmaker and a mother. My 4-year-old daughter loves Best Friends, Stardust, and Princesses. Her favorite book is Harold the Purple Crayon. She, too, is labeled by the occupation as a demographic threat. Do you have kids? I want you to take a moment and imagine how you would feel if someone called your 4-year-old child that. My daughter, your fellow U.S. citizen, is a first-generation American from St. Louis. She drinks St. Louis water, bathes in it, swims in it. And from all the proposals the city of St. Louis received last year to make our water better, Veolia is selected for her hometown. Veolia bans Palestinians like my daughter and myself from getting on Jewish-only buses in the Palestinian West Bank. Companies like Veolia support the Israeli occupation of Palestine and treat Palestinians over and over as second-class citizens in their own land. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This is not an arbitrary, faraway human rights issue. Look into the faces present here today. You'll see many St. Louisans who drink the same water, Cardinals and Blues fans who, like me and my daughter, are considered a demographic threat by the occupation, an occupation that is enabled and entrenched by Veolia. Please don't allow Veolia in St. Louis, not even for a consultation contract. Hold them accountable and stand up for your constituents and fellow U.S. citizens and St. Louisans, because Veolia's human rights violations are directly impacting them every day more than you know. Thank you.
Thank you. John Hickey.
Thank you, Chairman Flowers, and thank you, committee. My name is John Hickey. I'm the Missouri Chapter Director for the Sierra Club, and I was very glad to hear the gentleman from Veolia talk about how committed they were to the environment and environmental issues, and so that made me even more excited to speak. The Sierra Club is opposed to this contract, and I know that the gentleman, Mr. Edwards, said it's because we're biased. But the reality is, in 2003, the Sierra Club had to object to the clean air permit at the Veolia facility in Sauget because it was such a weak contract, such a weak permit. And the federal EPA, and this is the George Bush EPA, mind you, came in and agreed and said that the clean air permit was insufficient and rewrote it and issued it in September 2008. That plant was operated by Veolia from 1995 to 2008 without a clean air permit. And I know, as some people say, you're entitled to your opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts, and those are facts, and as the Sierra Club, we were involved in that in 2003. I'll be very brief. I think Alderman Cohn made a great point on the credit rating of St. Louis City versus Veolia. Another comparison I draw is the Environmental Working Group rated the quality of drinking water in the 100 biggest cities in the United States. The city of St. Louis rated number 9. The city of Indianapolis rated number 90. So 9, 90 out of 100, pretty different. And so I would ask this committee to keep that in mind. I will also, in the spirit of consultancy, I'm going to give free advice to Veolia and to Mr. Edwards. I wouldn't use ExxonMobil as an example to vouchsafe your commitment to clean water, because they did have the small incident known as the Exxon Valdez spill in Alaska. So I would that's free, no cost. I would drop that in the future. Thank you.
Pamela Halser.
Thank you much. I'm a resident of the city, Ward 24, and member of other groups, Quakers and Missouri Coalition for the Environment. But I read an article that I did forward on to you. It's the pushback against privatization across the country. And, you know, one thing that I would want to point out is that you do maybe have more power than you realize. That in New Jersey, the legislators there have actually passed a bill that would prohibit privatization contracts that achieve cost savings by cutting services or raising rates, and also require the company provide the workers comparable wages and benefits. And I am hoping that you, as the Board of Aldermen, would take the initiative to be proactive to protect our good water and our just honest government, to, for instance, prohibit subcontracting without going out to bid. You know, so that this could not be just under the cover and, you know, we're just over a barrel paying for things. To make sure that all city, you can write legislations to require that all city-private partnerships or all privatization contracts are subject to audits. You know, and if they do not meet the criteria of the audits, that there can be fees and the contract can be terminated. Also, you can write a bill that would require that all sunshine laws would apply to any private contractors. This has been a problem in other cities with this privatization. You know, here, if there's a problem with the water, you know, you can go get the disclosure. You can subpoena things, and the city is obliged to do that. In this contract, actually, it protects it. You know, it's like give them 3 days notice, hold them harmless if they don't comply. It's happened in other cities where the residents can't get the information that they want, that they should be allowed to have about, you know, why their water is impure impure, or why, you know, this hasn't been taken care of, or there wasn't any log of their call 3 weeks ago. You know, so actually it should be, I wrote it on the back of this article, like something, I'm not a lawyer to write this, but in any privatization or consulting contract, all items that are subject to sunshine disclosure laws will continue to be subject to all applicable disclosure laws. The city shall not enter into any agreement that would delay or make more difficult such disclosures or fulfillment of subpoenas. As a resident here, I feel this is important to protect my ability to get problems solved, to get the information we would need so that there would be justice. I also think you could write a law, you can write, you know, a bill that would say the City of St. Louis shall not give intellectual property rights away to any company or corporation. You know, if we're paying for consulting, that information should belong to us and not belong to them, so that, well, you know, they made the suggestion to, you know, track chlorine levels. So therefore, if we don't contract with them, we would have to pay them for that intellectual property. You know, that's ludicrous. So simply write something to disallow it. And finally, you can write things that would require any privatization companies that would have to maintain the same proportion of full-time, part-time, temporary workers, since that's another way that companies scrimp and save money, is to hire a bunch of underpaid workers, and that the wages and the benefits have to stay the same as this, you know, with this current cost of living adjustments. So thank you for doing this. I think in light of what was said today, I feel that the whole understanding has changed. I do think that the residents would be more receptive to rate increases with changes and efficiencies and things being done, you know, by city employees. And I, even as a gardener, also am quite in favor of metering, you know, that it's worth the investment, and it's fair. So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Halls, I appreciate it. Sandra Spencer. And then we're going to end up with David.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you for your patience and long suffering, my goodness. My name is Sandra Spencer, and I'm a South St. Louis resident, 13th Ward. I'm here today because there is no resource more important to protect than our water. I urge those who have the power to make these decisions to vote against the Veolia consulting contract. For all the reasons we have heard tonight, this is a bad proposition for our public water system and for residents across the city. Veolia claims that it will help St. Louis to be more efficient in its water delivery through the $250,000 consulting contract. But experience has shown that the type of efficiency that private water industry is concerned with is efficient generation of corporate profits. This includes tighter bill collections, pushing up rates, worker layoffs, labor right abuses, and health and safety violations. These so-called efficiencies do not equate to effective public water system delivery. Veola's track record speaks for itself. In Richmond and Burlingame, again, California, Veolia Water North America spilled millions of gallons of sewage. I think we've gone through that. We've talked about that already tonight. Veolia has been terminated in numerous municipalities throughout Latin America, from Argentina and Venezuela to Puerto Rico, because some of the same problems seen in many cases of corporate-controlled water. Given the troubling track record that we have heard this evening, it's not surprising that Veolia is struggling financially. The public has seen that when they put their water in private hands, promises are often broken in the name of profits. So Veolia is scrambling to open the doors to resistant communities through Trojan horse consulting contracts, like the one here in St. Louis. Multiple phases in the contract give Veolia increasing access to profit from our water. Veolia recently entered a similar consulting contract with New York City for an enormous price tag. The city is spending as much as $36 million for so-called efficiency purposes. Here in St. Louis, Veolia has attempted to bypass the democratic process. In 2007, the corporation gave Mayor Slay an award check for $15,000 on behalf of the city. Veolia hired a lawyer who also serves as a lobbyist for a political action committee for Mayor Slay. But concerned citizens brought this political interference to light, and due to public pressure, the city opened this public forum for us to express our concerns. A city spokesperson has claimed that if the city does nothing, water rates will increase. Yet we know that Veolia and the private water industry are notorious for water rate increases. Private water industry contracts versus doing nothing is a false choice. The private water industry has left many cities reeling with long-term costs to their water systems that ultimately fall back on the city to fix. American cities have a proven track record of efficiency, access, and quality through public ownership and management of our water resources. St. Louis can also be one of those cities. Our public water system is too important a community service to invite Veolia to exploit it. Today we are sending a strong message to Veolia, and the private water industry that St. Louis residents will not stand for corporate attempts to bypass the democratic